Priority.
Let's call to order this May 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Westford School Committee. I'm always amazed that I remember the date, but I think it's because we're looking at these meetings so far out in advance, right? Like,
couldn't tell you what day it is.
Really?
No.
We go to agenda setting and we're always like, okay, what's, in 2 weeks it's that meeting, and so I think that those dates are just like ingrained in my head. So anyway, it is May 23rd, and we will start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To what? Yeah.
We're not usually this close.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Right. He's remote.
He's with us.
I'm so hungry.
Recognitions.
So
Student representatives.
we do. So we have two gifts for our student representatives in the form of gift cards to thank you
Currency out there.
for all of your time.
Aw, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. One of whom we know we won't be seeing next year, and the other
that's so sweet.
other of whom would still be with us. But we want to thank you both. We want to congratulate you. We want to thank you for all of your all of the time that you've put in for us, and I think your just the insight and the perspective. We've had a lot of great conversations, and so we wanted to
Thank you so
give
much.
those to you and thank you for all your service.
Thank you.
Aren't you glad you came tonight?
Right?
I am very glad.
I'm glad.
Hannah, where are you going next year?
Boston College.
Hey,
Boston
congratulations.
College, studying pre-law. So, yeah.
There's still time. Mario or I can tuck you out of it. Yeah. Or Gloria, yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I'll miss you all.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to us this year. I think it's been really enjoyable for us to give our opinions and make and you guys make us feel like they're really heard. So it's been a really good year, and I'm excited for next year.
And Megan, you'll be a senior next year?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, I think you've given great insight, though. I mean, don't underestimate the power of your voices and just bringing a conversation. And I mean, I come back to the calendar, Hannah. You brought up a really strong point, and you really made it heard, and we all went back to the drawing board. So, don't ever underestimate, just having a conversation.
Thank you.
No, it was awesome.
And maybe we'll see Megan next year. Here.
Yes.
If you want.
Yes.
You're very welcome. It's time for our consent agenda.
Oh,
This agenda.
that's so cute.
Everything should have been in the packet and or emailed to the committee.
Transfers, financial update, yep. All right, motion to approve the consent agenda as outlined.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion or questions on that?
Chris,
Oh, yes, Laura.
might be worth just checking the attendance on the regular minutes for May 9th. I think Alicia was in there twice. and actually I think that was Marisol's first meeting instead of Alicia. I know we really miss her, but but so I think there was just an attendance thing. I wasn't at that one, but I looked at the minutes carefully because I wasn't there.
That is a good catch.
So, yeah, minor amendment.
Right.
I don't.
Birds.
Birds.
The birds.
Okay, not rodents or
No,
anything. like that.
birds.
All right.
There are birds in the ceiling.
Nick was speculating, right?
Yeah, no, we heard that earlier. We were in a meeting here earlier today, and I was like, "Is that?" Someone was sitting in the corner. I was like, "That's a strange ringtone." And I'm like, "That's not a ringtone." And then I walked. It's definitely.
They're
I think
noisy.
some baby. I think it's some baby birds. I
Yeah.
think there's a nest maybe, and
Like right there.
I think so. You could hear it way over there, right?
in. On the wall.
Christine's like, "Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, yeah."
It's funny.
Welcome,
Right.
birds.
We're here for public comment.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? Good catch. Okay, and I have great news for the committee. We're doing roll call votes tonight because we have a remote member. All right, here we go.
Oh, Min Kwon.
I'd have to abstain from the ones that I wasn't here for.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll just put that in the record that you're voting, I think we can say just voting for the ones that you were here for.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
I with the abstain for May 9th when I wasn't here.
And Ming Chen? Aye.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you.
That's great.
That works. That's good. You can hear us okay?
I can definitely hear you guys.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our 7:15 item is public comment. Folks online can make comment via Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to make public comment, you would want to hop over to Zoom.
Can you clarify for people watching on Zoom that the first step is to raise your hand and then you will identify them
Yes.
and then unmute them?
Because otherwise, we're not going to hear them because they're attendees. Yeah, so if you're an
Right.
attendee in Zoom, you would have to raise your hand and I would bring you in.
Correct.
And then we would be able to. If you're in the room, you would come to the microphone as Christine has done. And please sign in, and that's just so we get a good record of who was here and we don't misspell people's names and things like that. And as always, we'll try to limit everyone's comments to 2 minutes to make sure we have enough time for anybody who wants to speak. And with that, I recognize Christine.
I will do my best.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Christine Dussault. This is my 22nd year of teaching 4th grade at the day school. I'm the president of the Westford Education Association, and I also have a son who's in 6th grade who attends Stony Brook Middle School. Tonight I wish to speak as a concerned parent, teacher, and WEA president about the need to properly compensate our teacher assistants with a fairly hourly wage and benefits. My 6th grade son has been on an IEP since pre-first. This means in order for him to access the curriculum, he requires modifications and accommodations. These modifications and accommodations are the responsibility of any adult he works with, classroom teachers, special education teachers, or teacher assistants. For parents who do not know, towns and cities will employ teacher assistants for one simple reason, and that is to reduce the cost of hiring additional special education teachers. Here in Westford, it is typical to have 1 or 2 special education teachers per grade, knowing that it is impossible for any 1 or 2 special education teachers to fulfill their IEP caseload. Towns and cities will hire teacher assistants, so they will be in legal compliance with student IEPs. It is only because of these teacher assistants that towns such as Westford are able to meet the special education requirements of our students. Please keep in mind, teacher assistants do not have to have a background in education or special education. Our teacher assistants do not receive any training in any of the learning disabilities that our students have, and they are not given time before or after school to plan with classroom teachers. They receive no training in any of the academic programs that our teachers use in the classrooms. Our teacher assistants are in charge of assisting students access their classwork. In order for this to occur, teaching assistants must be familiar with the grade level content. Often teacher assistants are working in 3 different grade levels, thus having to know 3 different curriculums, all subjects included. Teacher assistants move from classroom to classroom during the day. The only break they receive is their unpaid 30-minute lunch. Due to the lack of substitutes, a number of teacher assistants forego their lunch just so students' IEPs will remain in compliance. My son's whole day is dependent upon the teacher assistants that work with him. My son has high-functioning autism, ADHD, and anxiety. It is crucial that each of our special education students be matched up with a teacher assistant who will develop positive and trusting relationships, a person who not only allows the student to access the curriculum, but does so in a very thoughtful and meaningful manner. A teacher assistant who cares about the whole child, not just the academics. In order for our special education students to succeed, we need to attract and maintain the best teacher assistants in our area, offering them an average hourly wage with no paid holidays or vacations is not acceptable. If Westford truly believes in shaping the future one student at a time, we surely need teacher assistants who are paid comparable hourly wages and receive better benefits than our neighboring towns. And in closing, COVID taught us many things over the past 2 years. People are no longer willing to work in jobs where their wages and benefits do not mirror their effort, their time, and their commitment. Westford needs to do better in the area of fair compensation and benefits for our teacher assistants. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Hi, I am Diane Nolan. I am a teaching assistant at the day school. I'm also a 24-year resident of Westford. My oldest daughter is in college and my youngest son is still at the academy. So I take this not just as someone who works for the school system, but also for someone who's vested in having her children have the best education. And with that being said, this is only my 8th year doing this. Prior to that, I was in private business running multi-million-dollar companies. And this became my fun job because I really care about kids and I really love what I do. Prior to doing this job, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what teaching assistants did. I really didn't. My daughter came home one day and said, "Hey, what about Mrs. Smith?" And I was like, "Who's Mrs. Smith?" And she was like, "You know, she's the other teacher in the building." That camaraderie and that leadership shows you how important we are as teaching assistants. I'm going to piggyback on Christine. I have many letters. I'm going to read one because I have 2 minutes. This is from the student support staff at the day school. And it says, "Good afternoon, school committee members and members of the Westford community. We are proud members of this Westford school community, and Westford has an excellent reputation for providing a high-quality, student-centered education. Westford is known for its dedication to its students, and between us, we represent 40-plus years of service to the school system. I couldn't be prouder to be here. None of us could. And although we are usually a quiet team, we support our members of this teachers union and of Unit E. We wanted to take this opportunity to share how important the Unit E negotiations are and how important the Unit E team is. We are grateful to have been able to work with amazing, dedicated, and compassionate colleagues, or teacher assistants. We call them colleagues. These individuals are the foundation of our educational system, especially when it comes to our most needy students. But please, don't think that's where it stops. In a general ed classroom, many students do not know who that teaching assistant is in for, how well they do their jobs. The teaching assistants are in the trenches, delivering support for a range of needs at all levels, often with no explicit curriculum to deal with, and issues that are not limited to learning abilities, but socio-emotional, socioeconomic, and cultural differences. Our amazing support assistants can sometimes expect to be in 3 or more classrooms a day. This requires them to often understand the curriculum at 3 different grade levels, and also at different stages of the curriculum, depending on the needs of the student. The teaching assistants are expected to be flexible with both students and staff. They are required to work 6 hours with a quick, oh, they hope they get it, half-hour lunch. Never mind any other requirements such as bus duty or anything else that they are asked to do. And ironically, they are always the most willing to take on anything for the school or for the children. On a weekly basis, they are pulled to sub as the teachers to which they are not fully compensated for. We are lucky to have many amazing teaching assistants here at the day school. They list all 7 of us. I'm not going to go through that. You know who we are. They are reflective, attentive, observant, and supportive people who deserve the best. They make connections and build rapport with students beyond their expectations. In any day, if you ask any of our principals, the children possibly know the teaching assistants far better than they even know the teachers. We couldn't do it without them. I'm asking you to rethink what you are offering these teachers assistants for your raises. We truly accredit our successes and the success of the Westford school system to them. Please consider giving them the raise that they deserve to help these fabulous people stay with us, but not for just us, but for our students. Thank you.
Lori Chiapetta, Miller School. I come to you today and read a letter from the McDonald family who is not able to join us today, and they asked that I would read their letter. We are writing to you today on behalf of teaching assistants of Westford Public Schools. We speak as educators who have worked as teachers for years in pre-K through post-high school. But most of all, we speak to you as parents of a special needs child currently enrolled in kindergarten at the Miller School. Parent of a student, Johnny, who has attended pre-K and kindergarten for the past 3 years in Westford. As such, we have firsthand knowledge of the benefits the TAs bring to the students with whom they work. First and foremost, the teachers are the backbone of the class, period. Without their presence, the elementary classroom would not function. The teachers cannot instruct, the therapists cannot perform their amazing interventions, and the TAs perform the envious role of surrogate parent for students who are otherwise unable to function in the classroom. They are providers and caretakers, encouraging and admonishing as needed. They wipe away the tears while promoting engagement. They are quite simply the first face Johnny sees in the morning and the last face he sees when he leaves at the end of the day. Their very presence allows the rest of the education process to unfold. From a parent's perspective, they take time to check in with us. Each one that has worked with our son takes the time to write in his logbook about his day. What he did well in and what he struggled with, how he performed during circles and therapies and lessons, and how he ate, played, socialized, and listened to directions. All of the things they know so well only because they are fully present and engaged with my son, paying attention constantly to what he needs and what he is doing. They go out of their way to make a connection with him when he arrives in the morning. Before they even get into the building, they have begun their work preparing for Johnny's day. They also go above and beyond this everyday classroom duties. We learned this during the COVID lockdown. They took the time to make activities for us to do with our son and dropped them off for us to use at home. From day one back in December 2018, they showed us how dedicated they are to Johnny's learning and our family. Working in tandem with teachers, first with Stacy Southern and now with Caitlin Johnson, we cannot possibly overstate the essential role that they have played in the development of our son. We thank you for your time and attention in this matter. Best regards, Michael and Catherine McDonald.
What?
Hi everyone. I'm Stacy Southard. I am a preschool reach teacher over at Miller School, and I've been here for 15 years. And I just wanted to read a letter I wrote on behalf of my lovely TAs. I received a call this morning from my child's school. She was sick and I needed to go pick her up. This meant that I had to leave my team mid-morning without support for the rest of the day. Even though they're always happy to step up to the plate, I still hold a huge amount of guilt when I can't be there. Maybe it's because the classroom is made up of very challenging students and needs. Maybe because I know how hard they all work. It could be because each one is a very good friend of mine. But overall, it's because they get paid an insulting amount of money for the type of work they do each and every day. The job description to be a REACH TA includes the following skills: assisting the teacher in implementing student accommodations, supporting the learning needs of students with IEPs, working with students throughout the day in a variety of areas that could include academics, social, organization, and behavior management. Does the job of a special education teaching assistant involve these above-mentioned requirements? Yes, it sure does. But there's so much more that these ladies do on a daily basis that is not part of the job description I just read. The job description does not mention screaming in pride and excitement because the student you're working with just said your name for the first time or looked at you with a smile. The job description doesn't talk about an occasional trip to the nurse for a headbutt to the face or a bite to the leg. It doesn't talk about the amount of learning they need to do to learn new curriculum and AAC devices. It failed to mention saving a child from choking at their lunchtime. The description says nothing about driving to a student's home to drop off a forgotten textbook, a Mother's Day gift, or a water bottle. There's no mention of celebrating a poop on the potty after potty training a child for months. It isn't written anywhere that you should come in when you are feeling like death after your COVID vaccine, but you do anyway because the lead teacher and another TA are out. The job description doesn't mention holding a car parade during the shutdown for each student, not realizing that the students' addresses had us traversing back and forth across Westford for an entire afternoon. But that didn't matter. The looks on the students' faces was well worth it. It didn't say how much of an impact these students would have on us that we would go get a second job in order to work directly with them. No job description could ever capture what these phenomenal individuals do day in and day out. Hopefully what I've said will encourage you all to give these educators what they deserve, a living wage. Let's ensure they stay with better pay. This wasn't written about the women I work with directly, but I feel this way about all the TAs I've come in contact with. We've all sat up here saying the exact same thing. It's time you guys start to listen. We can't put a price on the work of these compassionate individuals, but because they are simply priceless. But we sure as heck can try. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go on to informational updates, and we will start with superintendent update.
So last meeting, I shared with you that Paul Fox was resigning, and his last day was on the 20th. Jeff Goodwin, who is the individual who we had hired to be our facilities supervisor, he right now is going to be the interim while we go through the process of interviews for this next position. But so Jeff has agreed to step up and take on the role of interim director of facilities. So I want to give you that update. On Friday evening, our Best Buddies Student Advisory Club hosted the Best Buddies Prom. It was a huge success. It was at Westford Academy. It was under the lighted tent. The students had dancing, they enjoyed dinner, they had an award ceremony and a slideshow. This is information that Courtney Moran shared with me, and she said that they arrived in style and with excitement to see their peers and Best Buddy mentors. The Best Buddies Advisory Club is led by two devoted teaching assistants, Cheryl Denaro and Jill Seidlinger, and together they foster a friendship between the club members and club mentors. This special friendship is nurtured throughout the year with club meetings and special events. And this Friday night's prom was a special way to end the 21-22 school year. Students celebrated each other and said goodbye to those who were graduating. So we want to say a big thank you to Cheryl and Jill and all the student mentors for making that a big success. I think that's fantastic. I was able to attend the NHS Senior Recognition Ceremony last week, which is where I learned that Hannah was going to Boston College, because they had a big slide with everybody and their picture, and then it would said where they were going to school as they walked across the stage and accepted a book and or made a donation to the food pantry. I thought that was a really great event. And then Thursday, I saw a bunch of you at the district-wide art show that took over WA. I thought that was fantastic. I want to congratulate all the art teachers for all of the work that they did in curating that and helping bring that together. I met some elementary students who I had not met yet, who were very excited to show me their pieces of art that was there included. And then I personally just was floored by seeing the students who I had known from Stony Brook, who now were winning all these awards, you know, for the different scholarship awards and things that take place at the AP level, which was just fantastic. So I think I want to congratulate all the teachers who worked to put that whole event together, which was great. And the inclusion of having music was really great as well too. And they had a master class out, a theater master class out in the courtyard. It was just a really special event. I also enjoyed walking in the Apple Blossom Parade, which was a fun new experience that I had never had before. Watching people throw candy at the sidelines, I was a little surprised at that, but that was something that I had a whole bunch of firsts over the last 2 weeks going to these events, which I really enjoyed. And then the only last thing I wanted to share was that I did get some feedback from a couple of families based on my email that was echoing Ray Dick's email about recommendations for wearing masks if you're not able to physically distance for this time period based on the numbers. And I do want to make it clear that our recommending this same information, or more so making sure that people saw what Ray Dick had sent out, was not to create any divisive scenario. And I know I had some parents who were concerned that this would create shaming and blaming based on decisions that families are making. And I will say, based on what I've seen in the schools since January and then into February, I think people have been very respectful of each other's decisions and choices, and everybody's in a different place right now. And so I thought it was important. I really wanted to reemphasize the fact that we as a district, we recognize the varying level of needs that our students have. And I also wanted to be clear that I know that for some people wearing a mask is not a difficult thing to do, but for some people it is. It can be consequential to their learning. And so I just want to be clear that we're still committed to that. And my purpose to sending that out was to make sure that the families were able to read what the health department had sent out earlier. So if anyone was concerned that we were trying to create a divisive atmosphere, that's the exact opposite of what we're doing. We're committed to inclusion. We're committed to creating a safe, welcoming environment for everybody. And that includes providing updated information so people can, I think, make choices that are right for their families and for the classrooms. But with that was the end of my update.
Any comments or questions?
How was prom last night?
It was prom last night.
Yeah.
Pictures look good. I enjoyed Facebook today.
Yeah, I think that it was really well done. People were really happy. It seemed like everyone had a really good time. Well done.
I'm glad I wasn't in a tuxedo in the whatever temperature it was at photo time, 3 o'clock or whatever, 4 o'clock, whenever that was. So.
Yeah. It was more the makeup I was worried about.
That too.
That takes
it's
hours.
the hair.
So the hair.
Yeah.
When Cotillion was like 3 weeks ago, and it was really chilly. They were outside on the field. And
it was
freezing,
freezing.
right? And then prom was 90 degrees.
It was freezing and it was windy. Yeah. And prom, it was hot.
So congratulations to the seniors.
Yeah,
on
really
successful
fun.
prom. And thank you to all the teachers who volunteered their time to make sure that happened. Shout out Bob Ware in the back.
Okay, committee updates.
I'm sorry, there was just one more thing,
Yep.
the donations letter.
Thank you, yes, and that's in the packet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I knew there was actually something I'd said to Carrie earlier. I'm like, there was something else. Just for informational purposes, in the packet, we did include a list of donations that we've received as a school district this year, and so we wanted to draw your attention to that, to look through to see that, so we can acknowledge and thank the people who have generously donated a variety of things to us this year. Thank you, Valerie.
Is the Wi-Fi working again, or is it still out?
I had help on the town one.
Okay.
For right now?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have any problem.
Do you want to go on the town TOW guest?
Yeah. I need a password.
The password's on the whiteboard
Out
right
there.
You can
Okay.
just slip out and
Okay.
peek at it's all caps.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the donations, Chris. Can you just talk about how that kind of works? What fund it ends up in? Is it like earmarked for something specific, or does it depend on the donation?
It depends on the donation, but I mean, I think I'm going to look at Pat, who's sitting in the background, who can probably answer that more specifically. Did you hear the question, Pat?
I did. So when you get your quarterly reports, you'll notice that it's like Fund 100 and 220. There's a Fund 295 that has donations.
Okay.
So it doesn't go to the most minute of detail. So for instance, it might say a school's donations, but within that, they may have different categories for donations. But generally speaking, they go to 295. Some of our donations are also, for instance, in next year's donation, you'll see that some of the local photography studios are donating the cost of the bus passes. So there won't be any money that the district receives, right? But we'll track that donation in kind. That donation in kind.
Yeah,
but they're providing something for which it won't be a monetary deposit, but we'll receive something of value, and then we'll track that also. So that won't show up in the financials, but it's still a donation.
Okay. And for anyone who's listening at home who wants to be a benefactor, like, who should they contact about that? Is that your office, Pat?
Well, I would think maybe the first spot would be their own principal,
Yeah, okay.
and then if it's more at the district level, then yeah, central office.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And again, just a big, word of thanks to all those donors.
Yes.
It's nice to see this list, and to recognize them. Okay, other school committee updates. Catherine?
Just to give an update on the recent CPAC meeting. I know Sean wasn't able to make it, so I said I'd just give a quick update. At the recent meeting, Eileen Tatro presented the initial findings of their survey, which I believe they're going to be coming to us shortly within the next meeting or two to present. And just to say well done to Eileen. She did a great job in compiling all the data and presenting it, and I think it'll be very interesting for us all to see what they've come up with. And also the nominations have closed for CPAC for this year, and at the next meeting in June, we will be voting on a new chair and new co-vice chairs and secretary. So that's the June meeting coming up. There we go.
Any other school committee before we talk we were going to talk a little bit about the superintendent evaluation process, because you probably don't know this, but we realized like the materials that we had put in a shared folder for the committee members, like one of the forms wasn't complete, and I had kind of chalked it up to, well, we haven't done this in a couple of years, and the process changed. The recommended best practice process at the state level changed a little bit. And we're like,
No.
oh, maybe
They didn't change something on you, did they?
how would that ever happen? And so I think I was like, oh, that's just the new process. But then, like, looking at it more, I was like, no, that doesn't make sense, So we updated that. We gave the committee a little bit of an extension. But I thought Catherine and I spent a good talk today, which we both agreed that we meant to do this a while ago, so we had this sort of same footing or being on the same page. But I think, and tell me if, like, I'm going to give the highlights of some of the things we thought would be useful just to, like, share here. Yep. Again, at the high level, and again, a lot of us, some of us have only done this once or 0 times, or none of us have done this in 2 years. There's kind of the two major parts, the superintendent goals, and then there's the performance standards, and those standards are broken up into identifiers, right? No. Indicators. I think it was an ID, right? And the big change as of a few years ago was that we used to, of the 4 major standards, they all have, 5 or 6 or 7 indicators. So you multiply that, and that's like, 20 to 30 individual indicators. And we traditionally had evaluated every single one of those. With the new system, we have highlighted through the goal process the key indicators that link to the goals. And so just for people looking at it, you'll see all the indicators. So standard 1, student learning, I think.
Instructional leadership.
Management
and operations.
It sounded good, right? You'll see all the indicators, but we're really going to focus in on the one under each section that is outlined at the end of the goals document, and just focus on that. And then that's how we'll use it. And we talked about this today. I think it's still right and appropriate to reflect on other things other than those goals. We know the work that has gone on this year, so you certainly can factor that in, but the focus is tying that to the goals.
I think the comment section leaves like more open to add in anything that you want to highlight or whatever.
Right. So through your comments, you can tie in other things that maybe outside of the scope of the goal that you feel like are pertinent and important to discuss and to think about. I guess the last thing,
I was just going to say, for people who would not be familiar with it otherwise, that's very similar to the way that the teacher evaluation works, right? There are a gazillion indicators and standards, and so you look at them and you find targeted indicators that are connected to goals, and then there are times when you'll collaborate to look specifically at something. If there's something that you want to see more information about, you can do that. But to have evidence for everything it's just not feasible.
Right.
So that sounds like you're addressing it the same way.
Right.
That sounds good.
And I mean, going through it before, I remember being like, I'm not sure, you know, like it was,
Right.
it really was difficult, so this is definitely an improvement. I'm not gonna dictate how much people say right on the part where you can make comments. I think everybody can kind of figure out what they feel like. I would say, back when we did every single indicator, sometimes it would be nothing. I mean, you do so many, like, I don't have any comments on this indicator. Sometimes it would be a sentence or two. But I think given that we're doing just kind of the 4 focused indicators, it gives a little more flexibility. But don't think you have to write, like, you know, 2 pages per thing. I think that would probably be outside the realm of what most people would do. So if you want to see examples from past years, we can send those to you as well, just to have an idea. Sometimes that helps to have that sanity check. So I thought it'd be good to talk about it because it is kind of complicated. I personally find the materials, while there's a wealth of materials from the MASC and from the state, I find it all very confusing. Sometimes
There's
just
too
listening,
many.
right? The
There's too many.
presentation, the language used in the presentation sometimes just doesn't feel like it matches what's on the form,
Yeah.
and it's just, so don't feel bad if it
Depending on your
feels
learning style, you
confusing.
might, like, I preferred listening to the presentation again as opposed to wading through the multi-page PDF.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The one thing to flag as well that kind of popped up today was maybe for next year's policy committee to just go back and cast an eye over our 2 policies that kind of oversee this process in general. They definitely need updating, I think, kind of in regards to this new kind of form, and to maybe kind of give us a better handle on timelines and stuff. So there is a policy there, but it needs a bit of updating and checking in for everyone.
And we've said this, and we agreed that having a evaluation subcommittee up and running for next year will be helpful, because we'll have somebody sort of from the start shepherding the process, keeping our minds and eyes on that early as we do the goal setting is just helpful. And then wouldn't necessarily be a lot to do in the middle of the year, but I think that would be really
Possibly, or something we could potentially consider kind of starting at the end of this year in one sense, because kind of best practice is really, as we come out with the evaluation, you know, Dr. Chu then should really be taking that document and almost working on it over the summer, because that document kind of feeds what are the goals then for next year, or for next school year, that kind of we would be getting at then in the fall.
So actually,
Yeah.
The presentation I watched, they had a superintendent panelist talking about how they do it in Amherst, I think. And they actually create next year's goals right out before the end of this current school year, so that it becomes sort of tied to reflecting on the past performance, and then what are we going to kind of go into doing. So I thought that was interesting, as we're all
Well, that's good
learning.
teaching.
Yeah.
Your evaluations and assessments should always, they should be your kicking off point for the year, almost not your end of year check-in, because they inform what your next steps are. So, I don't know, it's maybe something we should consider as we chat more about it.
It is what we're talking about with the
Mhm.
school improvement plans, right? So we're
Right.
talking about shifting all of that to the spring. So, you know, I'm assuming, you know, my goals will be connected with the district goals.
But we won't have district goals until.
No, for the next time, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm saying that, I'm echoing that, yes,
Yeah.
starting that now is taking us into that process that we were talking about for next year.
Yeah, I'm assuming we'll have, like, we would do another round of kind of our separate goals, but because my take is, if it's next spring before we have the district
Right.
goals, those district goals would then essentially inform your third year of goals.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
So we're getting there. We're moving that.
Yeah,
timeline
the new
direction.
superintendent thing kind of threw, you know, they
Yeah.
had some extra different guidance on it in the guidelines, so we're just making sure we do it right.
So we've given the committee an extension to get their comments in because of that, and just let Catherine and I know if there are any questions or concerns, or if you just want, like, walk through it again, one-on-one, whatever it may be, we can do that. Okay.
Perfect.
Any other school committee updates before we go to the students? Okay, student update.
All right. Senior capstone presentations start tomorrow. So I believe it's Tuesday, Wednesday.
Some started today.
Presentations,
Yeah.
preparation. And then the exhibition is Friday, I think 8 to 12, where the students present what they've been working on for the past couple of weeks, which is really exciting because everyone's been doing some really cool stuff. I want to give a big thank you to our admin, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Ware, Mr. Antonelli, Ms. Murphy, for a very successful prom yesterday. It was a beautiful venue. Everyone had a lot of fun. And thank you to our class advisors and our class officers. They've been doing a really great job with everything. Yeah, it's a busy time. We have a lot of stuff coming up.
Yeah, so with the end of the year comes our elections. That process is happening. As you know, we have a lot going on with that this year. And, final projects are in full swing. We're not having finals this year, but we are still doing final projects in a bunch of classes. It's been nice to, walk around the school and see, some senior capstones, all the artwork and everything. So, their projects are really coming to an end, and we're gearing up for graduation. I believe the seniors' rehearsal for graduation is next week, which is really crazy to think about. Sports seasons are coming to an end. Everything's sort of coming to an end now as we're gearing up for summer.
I think most sports are in their DCL playoffs this week.
Yeah, I had my regionals on this weekend, so, we're on the last week. That's all we got for you today.
Capstone. So the capstone you have the presentations, but then there's the exhibition.
Yeah. So the
and that's in the gym, in the hallways, as it's been in the past.
I believe so. Yeah, in the gym.
That's at 10 a.m.
Seniors report at 9:30.
Starts at 10.
And that's open to the
Seniors
public.
report at 9:30.
So it's super cool. I highly recommend it. It's really fun to get to talk. You don't maybe get to talk to every senior, but you get to maybe pick a couple that look really interesting, had some interesting work or projects, and it's fun. I'm glad to see that. We didn't do it. We didn't do it in the past 2 years because of COVID, so it's very nice to see that again. And you're right. Graduation. We haven't even talked about graduation. Is before our next meeting.
That's right.
It's a week from Friday.
Oh no.
That's crazy.
And for the committee, I think I've heard back from everybody. I think we're going to have 6 committee members there. We're going to hand out diplomas for the first time in 3 years or whatever.
That's crazy.
And I think I've heard from everybody if they have particular students that they want to request to hand a diploma to. And so I will put together a list and have that printed and ready to go on graduation day. Show up. It starts at 5:30. I think we were told to show up at 5. Every year I do the same thing every year. They say show up at 5. I'm like, no, that's too late. I'm going to show up at 4:30. And then I show up at 5. So, because, I'm getting ready or whatever. And every year, I have on my phone.
I know, you told me.
Okay, everybody knows this story. Because I apparently don't care about data privacy. I have my Google Maps is always tracking my location, and I can go back almost 10 years and see where I've been. So every year I'm like, what time did I show up last year? And I look and I'm like, it's June 5th.
That's funny.
4:59. All right, I showed up at 5.
I don't know what to say to that.
I have scary insight.
No.
We all just learned a lot about
Yeah.
it.
Yes. I don't know if I had a point. I don't think. Just show up. That's all I'm saying. Just show up.
Yeah.
If you haven't gotten your parking pass from
This is gonna be
Hillary,
Dr. Chu's first graduation.
do that, and it'll be really fun.
Dr. Chu, this is going to be your first graduation.
It is. This is my speech.
Popular guy.
I'm gonna.
Is that edited or unedited?
I haven't edited it yet.
10 point, single spaced, double sided.
We should also actually, before we finish, give a heads up to the WA gymnastics team who won gold at nationals this weekend.
Wow.
So, we
Amazing.
should say well done.
Well done.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I have a senior at home, so there was also the senior movie was on Friday night, which was very well attended.
Oh,
It was
nice.
a great
I
time.
didn't know they did that.
Yeah. It was
What did they watch?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh.
Classic.
Right.
Good one.
Better to watch it Right? Than freshman year.
Ideas. All right, thank you.
Lots of good stuff happened.
All right, next up on the agenda, our first item under business is Westford Academy Student Handbook.
Good evening.
Dean Toomey here. Nice to see you.
See you as well. Just get organized here. Welcome. Welcome to the committee. Good to see everybody again. So just a quick review. Mr. Ware, Bob Ware, has primarily been the quarterback on the handbook at Westford Academy the last 7 to 8 years. So this year, we often change some of our duties as deans, and it was my turn to take over the handbook. With that very similar process, I think in the packet that you received, we form a handbook committee that we collect pieces or thoughts during the school year of different things that have come up. And then we meet 3 to 4 times over the course of the spring, intermittently, every week or 2 weeks, to formulate. This year we started with 18 items, and we whittled it down to 3. That's really what it was. Some we felt like were just possibly, editorial updates or minor things, or school committee things that are already going to be in there. In fact, there's probably 4 or 5 of those in this handbook that at the middle schools, the elementary, have already been approved. So for me, that's not a change. That is in there, and that's a policy. So it goes through the handbook committee. It gets approved at the school council, as well as we present it at our faculty meeting. We present it with our administrative team. We review it. So it's a thorough process. This year we went through our final 3 changes, edits with our Dean's Council, which is a group of 25 students that, we got a lot of head nodding, and some, we meet at 7 a.m. on Friday mornings once a month, but they were in agreement with the 3 changes. And the 3, really the 3, I think you saw them in there. The first one, just a little bit more information on what the I Decide program is, which you probably need to know that as well. It's a program through Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Randy Schuster, who has been involved with Westford Academy for quite some time, doing research, doing studies, surveys, as far as substance abuse and vaping and marijuana and drug abuse, things along those lines. And she and her program are now partnered with the Mass Department of Public Health to provide a program for students, an alternative to suspensions for substance abuse. Okay, it's launching this year. We are slotted to have our training in September. It would be a team of us. Health teacher has already stepped up. I'm looking for another faculty person. Myself and another dean will essentially be the team. And what the I Decide program is as opposed to a suspension, it's the equivalent of what it used to be, an in-school suspension. It's approximately 5 to 6 hours of education for that student, with a variety of resources, to the chemical health, to the advertising campaigns, all the elements of just trying to get them to think about it. And primarily this year, next year, we were looking at it with vaping, so nicotine, tobacco, in that category. The program is designed for all substances. It certainly is, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything. But in the first year, we decided that for us, out of all of our substance abuses that we've had over the past years, vaping is the number one. Vaping, possession of a vape, nicotine, those things, as far as our substance abuse, that's our number one substance, okay? And that's probably in the last 5 years. It has dipped this year. It dipped a little bit last year because of, I would say the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, it was new and it was something, and it's still going on. It's still happening. It's still happening in the bathrooms and all those things, but we figured, this is a good alternative for us. We did have an alternative program through Stanford University that myself and Dean Murphy and Dean Ware administered, and we're still administering it this year. But really, truly, in place of that suspension this year is what we're looking to do. Okay. If there was a second offense, it would still continue to be a suspension along those lines. And if it's a different substance, drugs, or alcohol, it would still be possibly a suspension at this point. But we're going to continue to examine that as we launch this program and really get our hands into it and administer it with the students as need be. Okay. Any questions on that one?
I have a few.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you for your overview, and I really laud you for thinking about an alternative to suspension. I think that's a great idea. So I just want to, I have a few clarification questions and then like a few further questions. Okay. So in terms of the length of the program, so you're saying it's the equivalent of like an in-school suspension.
Correct.
So instead of being suspended in school during that time, you would be in school doing the IDECIDE.
No, it would be after school, so you'd still be attending all your classes. Okay,
Cool.
so
That
there
was
is
my
no
question.
in-school suspension. You attend all your classes. It'd be a program of 3 to 4 sessions. It all depends on how many students or who the students are, but it'd be the equivalent of almost a full day of in-school suspension.
Okay, so you guys
It would be after school.
Okay.
And also currently through the Mass Department of Public Health, there is a stipend related to it that reimburses those students or the teachers that are administering it.
That's what yeah.
Sure.
Okay, that's great. And so then the teachers that would be administrating it would be the same teachers that are going through the training?
Correct.
Okay. And then
It's a two-day full training in September.
okay. And because I did a little bit of research online about it. So then is DPH is doing the training?
Yeah, it's Mass General Hospital.
Okay.
So it's Harvard Medical School, Mass General Hospital. It's Randy Schuster's team through Mass General Hospital that's administering the program.
Okay. All right, that's great. And so there's the opportunity. So you wouldn't be losing instruction. Great, you answered
Correct.
that question. Thank you.
Yes.
And then in terms of and so you're saying there's a stipend for so I wanted to know about the cost of the program, but you're saying DPH would subsidize that cost. And then would the students have a cost for participating in the
No.
program? Okay. And then I guess my last question is because in light is what I meant to say, in light of the information we're going to go further on in the handbook about the SROs, what information is collected through the IDECIDE program, if any, and who is entitled to seeing that information?
So, good question. So currently, we are enrolled in the program. That we have offered several emails and communications to the school community to opt out. Okay, and those will continue to go. Right now, the information collected for those students is just their name and the infraction. Okay, and it's totally voluntary right now. If there's an infraction, it's entirely voluntary. That if they pursue to do any further surveys or studies or anything along those lines, if they don't respond, then that's it.
Okay. Who keeps that information?
Who keeps the information?
Yeah.
Yep. So right now, it's the Mass General Hospital team.
Okay, so they'll be the keepers of the
Yep.
information. Okay. You said that, is there only one opportunity to participate in the IDECIDE program? So like if the first time you're offered it and you're like, I don't want to do it, I'll do the in-school suspension, but if like later on you're like, I would like to give that a shot, do you get another bite at the apple or like only first right of refusal?
It's the program is designed to be implemented as close to the infraction as possible. Okay. So it is going to be some work because we're committed to doing it.
Right.
And having the students do it. So it's it's going to be some work to get them there on some of those things,
Yeah.
as it always is.
Yeah.
Now there might be a student who just says, I just want the in-school suspension. I want it done and over with.
So they can choose.
No, there's no choice at this
Okay.
point. We
First time they will have to do
they would
this.
have to
first
do it.
time they have to do it. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's just for vaping, not for other drugs?
Vape, nicotine. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good questions.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, sure.
For obviously, like an in-school suspension or a suspension that would follow the student, right, for when they were applying to other schools or things like that. Would something like this for a first violation where there's the IDECIDE program, would that end up as part of their academic record?
No, it would not. It's not part of the academic record. And I would defer to my school counseling department as what is reported to colleges. I believe it is totally optional to report anything at any point at this point now.
Oh, really?
But I would refer.
Okay.
I would refer that to my school counseling department.
I just presumed everything got reported.
Yeah, but usually, traditionally, in-school suspensions are not reported.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And, one more question. Dan, do we know where do the fines go to?
The
money
town
from
of
the
Westford.
fines. Oh,
It's a
okay.
town of Westford bylaw.
Okay.
So we were all sworn in when that happened as agents of the town of Westford to enforce the nicotine vaping on school property and town property.
So it's not like the money necessarily comes back to the schools to prevent.
Correct.
You know.
It does not.
Okay.
Correct. It goes to the town. But I like your thought.
It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Goes into the collection.
Right.
Okay, so that's the first one.
Yep. And thank you, I want to thank you for implementing that, having an evidence-based alternative
Yeah.
that really addresses the issue. I think that's fantastic.
And it's we have a long-standing relationship with Dr. Schuster and MGH, and it's a natural fit. And it's when they advertised it, it was wildly popular, and schools are signing up for it. And it's more demand than there is opportunities to do the training right now.
Sure.
So, okay. The second one, it has to specifically the word taunting, and obviously we had some history this year and an incident. The word taunting does not appear in the handbook. Okay, also known as chirping and other things along those lines. Now there is a section under athletics and in the student athletic handbook about sportsmanship and taunting, and it's very clear. But this clearly defines what it is, and it falls in the student conduct area of the handbook. And possible consequences could be anywhere from detention to suspension to restorative practices, to seek to restore the damage done. And we added it as the student misconduct section is a laundry list of things that we've encountered over the years and traditionally have, and that's where something like this would go. Okay, so it's clearly the definition of it, and then what it would be. Any questions on that one?
Do you have anything?
I was looking at it, and I think that there's a couple of, I don't know if this is the kind of feedback you're looking for, but there's a couple of misspellings in it.
Oh, those have been corrected. Those have been corrected. I don't know how those happened.
It's okay, but I just thought I was...
Editorials have been corrected.
I think that, I just was looking at it more closely. There was the section on sexual orientation. I thought maybe that, for more clarity, should be in the section, the word sexual orientation is in the last sentence, and I didn't know if that belonged more in the conduct that attacks religious beliefs, size, economic status, and speech, because it seemed confusing to me, but
the definition the definition is from the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association. I mean, that's the definition that they use in their handbook.
Yeah.
And I know at that level, and you'll hear more of this down the road from athletic director Bunyan, that the league has continued to look at what their sportsmanship policies are, and I know at the MIA level, just receiving some of those emails, that chirping and taunting is an issue. So I believe they're going to revise their own definition of it. But that's the definition that we used for now. So absolutely, I could wordsmith it a little bit.
I just thought that was was this confusing as to, I understand, but I thought that should be included in the section on religious beliefs, but
sure, go ahead.
I think overall.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was it's a little verbose, right? And that it's, broken up with 100 commas. But anyways, and that's what I realized, that it's actually the MIAA's taunting policy. So, I mean, I think it makes sense that we have some continuity between the two, right? Because we're bound by the MIAA policies. Right?
Yeah, for sports, but this would be, for any event. I mean, there's always a focus on athletics, but there's also, there are other times that things happen, where taunting takes place in a school community environment. So it's definitely a start.
Other comments or questions on that section? Megan.
Have you guys come up with sort of what are the consequences if this rule is violated?
Sure. So in the handbook, it falls into the student misconduct, and there are many different things in that section.
Yeah.
And it clearly says in there it could be detention, suspension, restorative practice. It could be any of those things. There's on all of these, my experience being a former athletic director and now a dean of students,
Yeah.
it is such a wide range of things and circumstances that there's no true, like, you say this, you get this. But having this in here and bringing this attention to the students, because it is a problem, the taunting and chirping and those types of things, it is.
Do any of the consequences involve a training program by any chance that would sort of?
Any of the yes, it does.
Okay.
Anything
okay.
restorative
Yeah,
practices or
I see.
alternative practices.
Yep,
Yeah,
I
it could
see.
be meeting, with another educator or
Okay.
myself or Mr. Ware, and or any person that we found would be a valuable resource to that student.
Okay, thank you.
Is it worth following on from what Magna was saying? You know how in the first proposal we had, the first violation, they automatically go to the I Decide program. Is it worth considering making that specific consequence in this section, that if this is a first-time offence, you have to do that program or that restorative process kind of automatically before then, looking at suspensions or further infractions?
I see your point.
Yeah.
I think there's been really some challenging moments in the last couple of years as an administrator who deals with discipline. And there's also times where I need some flexibility. It could be so egregious or something so wrong that it might need something more than a restorative practice. And there are times where certainly that just myself over my 5 years as a dean, I have changed myself. I was very much a black and this happens, and really understanding more and more how much time and effort it takes with discipline to have conversations. I feel like those do make a lot more of a difference in the long run. But I think as an administrator, I think I need that flexibility in there, to clearly define it. I think might put me in a tough spot. So.
And the challenge too is, because I think that's a really good point. We don't have a set program.
Yeah.
And so I Decide is
very true.
an established program, a partnership, and it's funded, right? And so I think that's the big difference. If there were something that made sense, you'd still want the flexibility, but if there was even something we could name, we would.
That's a good point too.
Probably would.
There could be an opportunity to write a grant for something like that.
Yep. Well, we're putting in for ESSER, or not ESSER, for ARPA funds for restorative practices in our schools. So that would be a first step towards being able to integrate some of this more fully and intrinsically in the school culture a little bit. So, any other questions on proposal number 2? Okay.
And then the last one, when we had our students on the committee, we had 3 students, Marzouk JJ, Samrita Murthy, and Rajpal, who right out of the committee, I was virtual and they were in person. I had family situation, and clearly what the students wanted was a statement on our beliefs and our values as a school, on our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was very clear. So, and like taunting, those 3 words don't appear in the handbook. So I took it upon myself with Samrita and a lot of time and effort in reading and researching and a lot of things to formulate something. And it still needs work. It still needs work, but it continues to go through the right groups and committees and organizations, and Dr. Chu putting his feedback into it, and most recently at a DEI committee last week. It keeps getting better. But what is missing from the handbook is that statement. And also, if that statement is violated or something along the lines of it's challenged, what the possible consequences could be. And there you have it. And there are some edits there as well. There are some edits. There are definitely. So that's where we are. And it is important to have it in there. I think it's something that we all believe in. And what other better way to put it than to clearly express it and put it in your handbook and share it with your students.
Thank you for doing so. Questions on Proposal 3? Or comments?
I just want to add, I appreciate that in the rationale, you mentioned that that there was a desire from the students
Yeah,
for this.
definitely.
So I appreciate that you're honoring that, the seed of that idea and the voice.
Thank you.
One of the conversations that we had at the DEI team was just, we had representation from all the schools, and the principals were there, and we talked about the fact that this was coming to you. So Catherine was there. One of the things we said, we imagine that the next question would be, well, is this going to find its way into all of the handbooks? And if that was something that the committee supported, then what would that process be? And we talked about the importance of it reflecting the names of the schools, and then we talked about the formality of a statement versus the kid-friendly nature. People were very excited about having something very specific like this that could be posted in classrooms, that then again, age appropriately, they could be unpacking to talk about, what does it mean? What does this look like? What does this look like at NAB-NASID? What does this look like at Abbott? And so I think that the fact that the Academy and the students specifically who said we want to have something like this, it's already had a trickle effect, which I think is great.
That's fantastic. That would be amazing to see that propagate down, to see it translated to the appropriate level of the schools, such that it has a real impact, and to get students involved at those levels too, right? I mean, at any level, the students can talk about some of these issues and help craft what those words might be that they want that community to adhere to. So that's really cool.
And I think that from reducing it to writing is really important, because in the DEI committee that I chair, the statewide DEI committee, we agree on terms, right? You agree on language. Like, how are we, what are the terms we're going to use? What does that mean to everyone in our community? And so in some ways, it's taking the first step to say, like, these are the terms that we agree to as a community.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've also had this discussion on the policy subcommittee, is does there need to be at the level of a district policy along these lines? And we've kind of struggled with that choice of whether that should be a policy, since we do have policies on non-discrimination, we have policies on that prevent harassment. Would this type of statement be appropriate? And I'm really glad to see that Westford Academy, through the student impetus, is leading the way on developing this, and I hope we can just keep the conversation ongoing between policy subcommittee, between the DEI team, and with the other schools, and what would be appropriate for each levels, and is there something appropriate at the district level, or is this something that really resides in the handbooks? I think it's just an ongoing conversation that we need to continue to have, but I'm really glad to see Westford Academy taking the first step on this, so thank you.
Any last questions or comments for Dean Toomey? Well, thank you so much. I think it's some real, I mean, it's not a lot of changes, but they're pretty impactful. Right? And I really appreciate all the work that you all went in being very thoughtful and intentional about what's in there. And our thanks to the Handbook Committee for their work on this. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the Westford Academy Student Handbook for next year with the outlined proposals.
Second.
Any last discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. Roll call. Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming-Chen?
Aye.
Okay, it's approved 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there,
Thank you.
just before we move on, what did you come up with an answer during that meeting, Catherine, about if now the committee's already approved the elementary and middle school handbooks, and we talked about it, and Alicia looked at it, and we talked about it during the DEI meeting, and I'm trying to remember if the committee would need, if the committee wanted this to be included in the elementary and middle school handbooks, if you would just need to amend that, or was that?
We didn't have a definite answer And then I think there was also the question mark, is I know some stuff gets printed, so time-wise, I mean, I think we can do it if we want to.
Right, because there was, I think they said we just had to have it by the end of May.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So it's really up for discussion with the rest of the committee.
Does
I
that
would
make,
say.
does that question make sense, Gloria, what I'd said?
Well, yeah, I think I think it would first kind of maybe bounce back to leadership to feel like, is this language something that would be
It is.
appropriate?
That's the conversation we already had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually agreed that all of the different levels all chimed in and agreed that this is fantastic. This is formal. It shouldn't say Westford Academy at the other schools. I also I thought it'd be more powerful in the handbooks if it has the school's name instead of just Westford Public Schools, but it could certainly simply just be Westford Public Schools. Because at the building level, they all talked about what does it mean to make this teacher-friendly for teachers and students in an appropriate way, but it needs the formality of a statement everybody agreed with.
But
You know,
also,
sorry. You go.
The one thing in that conversation that was clear as well was this can be the jumping off point, so that while that might go into the handbook this year, it's the start of a conversation, and there might be a different reiteration of it for next year's handbook, and that it's something that can develop and change as the conversation grows, and that maybe each then individual school, you know, puts their own kind of stamp on it. But there was definitely that that thought that this would be an excellent jumping off point for this. So it was, I think it was.
I think sorry.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is, you know, when I was running for school committee, a lot of people talked about that this was something that happened in our community, right? That it just didn't happen in our school, that it happened in our community. And so maybe a suggestion is not just in Westford Public Schools, it's in the community of Westford we strive to develop. And so it says that we as a community think that this is something that is a thing that's valuable, since I think that's what the community members are saying as well. It's a thought.
Yeah.
From a process standpoint, just in terms of the handbooks, I mean, we've approved elementary and middle school handbooks. We're specifically approving the Westford Academy handbook. I think we could easily, if administration feels that this particular statement should be added to the elementary and middle school handbooks as well, we could just entertain a motion to amend them accordingly and have this added to those handbooks as well.
I would definitely entertain that motion. I think it's something it's not changing the prior approvals, and it's adding something that we just approved for another handbook, so I think we'd be pretty comfortable with that. Even including minor tweaks to change school names or community, you know, whatever feels appropriate.
Okay.
Customize it.
I mean, you just nailed the motion.
Okay. So I will move that the statement designed for the Westford Academy handbook be amended as appropriate so that it can be added to all of the individual middle school and elementary handbooks going forward.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, I will call for the vote. Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen? Aye. Okay, that passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Toohey.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Word.
Okay.
Makeup ground somewhere.
How are we gonna-
Whatever.
Chris,
We
are
don't-
are you
the
able to
makeup
project?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great, thank you.
This never happens, but we're a little bit behind, so apologies for our 8:20 agenda item, folks, and apologies for our 7:50.
Yeah, 7:50 agenda item.
Oh, that's feasibility.
Hey, how are you? We're going to be talking about the English Language Parent Advisory Council, and we have Amy Daly here. Thank you for joining us.
We're excited to have Amy here. We are moving forward in the district with the development of an LPAC, which is an English Language Parent Advisory Council. That's required for any district who has more than 100 English language learners, or if ELL makes up 5% of their population. So we have now met and exceeded the threshold of 100 students. I think to date we have 137 ELL students, which is about 54% higher than it was in 2018. So we've seen incredible growth. Amy's going to talk a a little bit about the role of an LPAC, but all of you have familiarity with the CPAC, which is the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and this very much mirrors that concept. And we have Amy Bailey here, who has really been spearheading this, getting the planning group together, as well as getting this launched next school year, which is a wonderful opportunity for parents. And Amy happens to be absolutely everywhere. She's involved. She's so dedicated. She's always advocating for students in general, and certainly the population of multilingual learners. So I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you. So the LPAC comes out of some legislation in the last few years called the Look Act, which is the language opportunity for our kids. There were a number of things that came out of that legislation, including the seal of biliteracy, and the LPAC, we have now reached that threshold. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll keep it going. There are a few key pieces that fall under this legislation. So just as the CPAC has a reporting role, the LPAC has the same. So yearly, and they'll request that opportunity to come and speak with you. We'll meet regularly to talk about planning and developing English learner programs, learn about their experiences, gain that feedback from their perspective so that we can enhance the experience overall in our district. And they will also review school improvement plans just as the CPAC does. It's really modeled on that. Next slide, please. So in terms of getting this up and running, the Department of Ed put together a number of training modules, both for school staff and also for parents. So I did the training module for school staff, and one of the first things that we do in this process is to create a planning committee. So we're not an LPAC yet, but we're working our way there. And I had some wonderful staff members volunteer to be a part of this committee. So Melissa Boylan, whom I also need to apologize to because I misspelled her last name on my slide, and it should be an A-N at the end. I did not catch that in time, so apologies to Melissa. She's the Miller School principal, so she is part of our committee. Kevin Merrigan is a school counselor at Blanchard. Colleen Tessier is one of our ELL teachers at the Miller School, and Michelle Wagner is the ELL teacher for Westford Academy. So we have that K-12 span. I'm in the 3 to 8 range, so we've covered all bases, and we have an administrator, a school counselor, so it's great to hear that perspective on how different people interact with our multilingual students. So we have been doing some research. We were able to get some feedback from existing LPACs. We heard from Burlington and also from Acton-Boxborough about their experiences so far. Tingsboro and Billerica are in the same boat as us, doing their planning this year to get it up and running for next year, and we're hoping to connect with Chelmsford. We haven't been able to pull that one out yet. I had a chance to interview some CPAC leaders and former leaders, so I spoke with Eileen Tatro, I apologize if I am mispronouncing names, and Kathy Healy-Norton also met with me, so I was able to learn the experiences of running the CPAC and get some of that history to learn more about us. And then I put out some videos. People get to see my face in my email videos. So I did a video for parents too. We are still hoping that parents, caregivers, guardians might want to join us in planning. So if there are any of you out there that are looking for something extra to take on, we only meet once a month, so it's not huge. But we would love that parent voice on our planning committee as well. When we move to the next slide, and I'll go through.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
Is there interpretation services available?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Because the parent would obviously pay to
Yes.
participate, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So our first official LPAC meeting we hope to have in October, and as a district, it's our position to support parents until parents, guardians, caregivers are able to get it up and running. The experience that other districts have shared with us is that it may be a longer process than maybe we would like, but we have to give it that time to build those relationships and have the parents learn how to take it on, and we have to tackle the bylaws, and there's a lot that goes into it. So this will be kind of a longer term process, but creating bylaws, electing leadership will be something that comes down the road, but planning this initial meeting will be our responsibility as the district to get it up and running and then help to facilitate until such time that families can take it over. Next slide. So our goal with this, we're really excited about giving a place for families to make connections and be able to do some networking, to really amplify the voices of our community, and to partner so that we do learn from their experience. We learn what it feels like to be on that other side of the table, and we think this is going to be a great opportunity to make more connections and to really bring them into our school community and extend our school community out to them. So this spring, we're hoping to get some feedback from families, particularly about those logistical issues about whether they prefer virtual meetings or in person, and times of day, what days, so that we can actually send out, here it is, October, specific date. So we have a family survey that will be going out in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. There's a flyer that has a QR code on it that links to a Google form that we'll be mailing home to all of the students, families who are currently enrolled in the English Learner Program. But the LPAC is not just for current families. It's for anyone who has ever been a part of the English Learner Program in Westford Public Schools, which is a pretty good chunk of our population. And so we'll be also communicating that out through school principal communication. They'll have that QR code in the flyer as well. We have a number of families in our district that do require translation, so we'll be sending home a translated copy of those questions to those families as well. And my contact information is there, so if there's ever a family that needs additional language support, they can just reach out to me and we'll coordinate to make that happen. So that was short and sweet. I'm ready for questions.
Go ahead, John. Thanks, Amy. I think, like, at least my experience with CPAC has been that it's kind of like the strength and comfort and having people who are having a similar experience. So I think clearly this is going to provide something that folks are going to be looking for. My question, Amy, is this something that's new to Massachusetts or just new to Westford? Because I know that you outlined that some towns already had that. Like, how long have they had it?
So it was, I didn't write down my date. It's 2017 or 2018 was when the Look Act, 2017. So those districts that already had that critical mass of multilingual learners in their district were already doing this. So we've been watching our numbers grow and get to that threshold where this becomes a requirement for us as well. So larger districts have already had this and have already been doing it, but districts with about a similar level population as Westford are just getting into the process now.
Great.
I'm really excited about this initiative. I think one of the amazing things that the CPAC has done is to really raise the visibility of special education and the importance of the special education services and how vital our special education teachers and our special education students and families are as part of our school and greater community. And I'm excited to see that now happen with our English language learners.
Me too.
Ming-Chen, you had a question?
Yes. So I have one comment and then probably one question. So the comment I have is that given like the English language learner program is a little bit like different from the special education. That the success probably is going to be measured by how quickly the students can actually graduate from this program, so that they attain enough English proficiency to actually get into the regular literature programs. That's one comment. And then because I heard some of the stories from parents from my community, their kids they actually born. The kids were born in the United States, right? It's not like they're coming from another country. And then before going to school, their kids either stay with grandparents or didn't actually go to daycare because they want their kids to actually be able to speak their language. And then obviously when they first got into elementary school, kindergarten, the first year they got into the English language program, which they think that the kids, they are not going to be able to catch up at that young age, very quickly in a couple months. But then they raised a concern that the next year their kids still actually got placed into the English language program, where the parents are not very happy about it because they want their kids to actually have the normal education experience instead of different education experience. That's one comment. The question I have about the LPAC is that given the success in Maya, hopefully the students can actually graduate from that program. How do we actually ensure the continuity of the parents? Because when the kids are gone, probably the parents are not going to be very much invested. So are we going to see a lot of churn in the LPAC? And how do we make sure that the leadership will actually continue?
Those are great comments and great questions. To address your question first, the one parent that did reach out to me with some interest was actually a former English learner parent. So I do think that we have some parents that would like to use the experience that they've had to help benefit other members of the community. So I think that that's a possibility. But a lot of this is very uncharted territory. And so while we are modeled after the CPAC, we do have this constant rotation of students and families that go through our program. We don't have somebody who comes in kindergarten and stays with us through 12th grade. So it will be a challenge to make sure that we're continually engaging with our families. And I think one of those ways that we do that is just continual outreach as the teachers of the English Learner Department to really talk about the benefits and resources that come from being part of an organization like the LPAC. I also think that there's a lot of possibility with the LPAC for us to better clarify what happens in the English Learner Program, what progress looks like. For example, some of the comments that you had, one of the things that came out of the Look Act was benchmark scores. So the Department of Education calculated the amount of time that an average student would take to progress to full academic language proficiency. And one of the things that people might not understand if they haven't had a lot of work in the multilingual field is that when we're talking about language proficiency, we're not talking about those basic interpersonal communication skills. It's one thing for me to go travel to a Spanish-speaking country and find my way around, but if you plunked me in high school English or high school Spanish, I would have a really hard time. So it's getting all of those academic language skills across all the content areas combined with the social and instructional language that happens throughout the classroom. And students typically take 5 to 7 years to get full proficiency in academic language. We don't keep students in our program for 5 to 7 years. There's a certain level that we want them to reach before they're no longer a part of our program, and then we monitor their progress for the next 4 years to ensure that they are getting to those levels that we need them to get to. But we're not, I don't think we've had quite the opportunity to reach out to our families and really go through these details and explain how it looks. So for all of our students that we've had for more than 2 years, we have benchmark goals for their testing to ensure that they are reaching those levels that we would like them to reach. And one thing that we'll be working on as a department is the outreach that we do to families to partner with them and partner with the other teachers to create a language plan for students who are not meeting their benchmarks, and to communicate with families for students who are meeting their benchmarks. They are on target to exit in the time that we would expect them to do so. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us, but I do think we're really going to have to do the work of getting the word out and bringing our families in. And one way that we're going to do that, starting off this year, that I didn't mention yet, we're hosting a new family information night the week before school starts. Because when families are new to Westford, there are so many questions about busing and lunches and what are allergy concerns and how do I do that? And it looks different at the different grade levels. So our planning committee is going to be hosting a new family night on Tuesday, August 23rd from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And all of this information will also be going out in principal communication throughout the summer. But if people know of new families moving to town, we would love to see you. So we'll be doing some presentations to give the basic information that we know everybody needs. And we'll be reaching out to community organizations, school organizations to have tables in the hallway, so that part of it is sort of an information fair as well.
And we can make sure that that information is also shared just at the schools for new registrations over the summer.
Yes, we have a flyer that's going to be ready for all new registrations that take place.
Oh, so this is going to happen at all the schools on that day. Oh, that's super cool.
And so that way we'll also be able to advertise, we've got this LPAC thing for all you new people.
I have a few questions because I'm really excited about this. Okay. The outreach, what are the languages that are most prevalent in the program? Because then I'm kind of interested in like what you're thinking about in terms of your outreach and making sure that things are translated so that.
The majority of our families are multilingual and fluent in English, but our most prevalent languages are Chinese, Gujarati, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish and Korean. Those are the ones that we provide translation for. We also have a number of families that speak Telugu, Hindi, Tamil, Russian, and Gujarati, though we have not had requests for translation in those languages. Oh, I'm sorry, Gujarati's on my translation list.
I saw it. Okay, and then in terms of you're going to send out this survey, and I also do a lot of data collection for my program. So what is your goal for return on the surveys? Because you have 137 ELL students. So like, what feels like, this is a great, because I don't think everybody's going to write you back. So like, what's the goal? Like, what do you hope to get back so you feel like?
I would love 75%. Realistically, I think I'm hoping for 50. So after we have a little time with that information out there, our follow-up will be emails to our specific caseloads to say, I hope you saw this. We'd love to hear from you.
Is that survey going to go out to potential families who have their kids have left the program? I'm just wondering, is their feedback also relevant for setting this up?
It is.
Okay.
We don't have as easy a way to reach all of those families, but we'll be sending the flyer home through the principal communication as well.
This is great.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, is it similar then to CPAC in that CPAC is kind of, the district had a responsibility towards setting up CPAC, and so LPAC is the same. And the guidance is that, that it can't be disbanded. CPAC can't be disbanded, so LPAC is the same. So the district has a responsibility to, I know Ming Chen was kind of wondering about,
Yes.
keeping up membership. So we have a responsibility to encourage membership.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't clear about that. Yes, we have a responsibility as a district to keep it going. So our main goal is to get it up and running and supported in such a way that families can take it over. But if there comes a time that families are not able to keep it running, then the district must step in.
I think even if you get enough families, it's awesome to have the district still working along. I mean,
Hopefully
I
it
think
will
that's what we
feel
get with CPAC.
like a partnership, but a family-driven partnership.
And so what you're talking about is even if we dropped below 100 multilingual students, we would still need to keep this?
I haven't looked at the
Sorry.
law clear enough to know whether there is any kind of retroactive. The way the law states is that when you reach the 100 or the 5%, whichever is less, you're required to create it. And then the law states that the districts must keep it going if families can't run it. But I don't believe there's wording about if your numbers were to drop down.
Sorry.
Other questions?
Could I just also make a comment or to note that I think as we have a CPAC liaison, I think we should also have an LPAC liaison.
I want to be that person.
There you go.
We would love it.
I'm not surprised.
I didn't want to ask. I thought that was forward. And I'm glad that you
I was
asked.
asking for you.
And I was going to say, let us know what we can do to help in this initial planning stage as it comes online to get the word out. I mean, because I do think getting that involvement will be so critical, and we
Absolutely.
are here to help you do that. And you'll be coming back anyway as an LPAC to talk to us, but just reach out, come back as often as you want, and we'll help you
Thank you.
get this exciting new endeavor off the ground. I think it's nice to see. We knew it was coming, and really, really appreciate your leadership.
Thank
in
you.
getting it going.
Sorry, Chris, can I just check, do we have access, I'm just thinking, setting it up, you might want, obviously, logo development if you're trying to send out forms. Is there some sort of funding available to just kind of help with that initial setup if needs be, or has any of that been discussed?
No, because they're not, they're not yet set up and independent to have their own funding, so any funding is coming through us.
Yes. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, the answer's no, because
Yeah.
the funding's ours. Yeah.
No, but as in, have we looked at if there is a need for maybe some funding that we can figure out a way that maybe we
I
can-
am not concerned that if Amy identifies a need, that Amy's gonna speak up and say, hey, is this a possibility? Because she's actually an incredible advocate for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You heard it.
Thank you.
Amy, you.
It doesn't say. I'm looking it up, but it
Oh,
doesn't say.
I wouldn't think you could dispense. Is that what
I think, yeah.
I would imagine that if you then got in trouble because it
Hi, guys.
wasn't running,
Good night.
they would then want
Hi,
to look
guys.
to see what is your current population before we then decide whether.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
you can. I think they
Once it's up and
probably
running.
just gave folks time to get it up and running
Yeah.
so that they weren't.
Yeah.
All right, our 8:20, we're a little behind. 8:20 agenda item is the rec center feasibility study. And we have Chris Barrett. And Chris, if you wouldn't mind introducing our co-presenters.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for having us this evening. My name is Chris Barrett. I'm currently serving as the Vice Chair of the town's Park and Rec Commission. With me this evening, I have Gary Cocoluto from FM Architecture out of Boston, and Stu Isaac out of Michigan, the Isaac Sports Group. Also, Jeffrey Brem, who's not here with us this evening, from Meisner Brand Corporation out of Westford, has contributed to the study, and in particular some of the topics we're going to cover tonight, so I just want to call that out. Our goal tonight is to present a fairly concise presentation that focuses on the benefits of a recreation center to the Westford School students, as well as highlight a little bit of the benefits to the community, and to particularly spend a lot of attention on the sites that we've now have analyzed and what we are recommending as possible sites to move forward with if we do decide to go forward with building a facility. For those of us who aren't here this evening and are watching, I just wanted to point out that on the town's website, under the Park and Rec Commission's section of the town website, there's a lot of additional information. We've had a number of different presentations already, one to the general public in March, another to the Park and Rec Commission. Both of those presentations are on the town website, so if anybody's interested to get more information about what we've done and where the study's heading, those resources are available. So with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, could you bring up the presentation, please? And I think we're going to turn it over to you, Stu, first.
And
that'd be great.
Gary, right? Gary?
Yes.
Yes. Gary and Stu, welcome. And I
Thank
have to
you.
apologize. This was PowerPoint converted to Google Slides, so if there's anything fancy that somehow didn't make it through, I apologize for lowering the quality of the presentation. But it looks like it mostly came through in time.
So if we make many mistakes, we can blame it on the conversion.
There you go. We apologize in advance for Google.
Okay, next slide. Wanted to just touch base on the objectives of the study. Don't want to really focus on all these elements, but I want to call out a couple specific ones. That first bullet point, identifying the community and stakeholder needs, opportunities, and objectives, is the heart and soul of any of the study that we're doing. And we've been very involved with engagement with the athletic groups, the CPAC, I've heard they're brought up several times here. We had multiple engagement with them, so that's very important. And then we developed the program and schedule model, really put together all that input from the needs and the opportunities. And then we turn that over to Gary, who develops as the architect, really the program model and designs that support that. And then that leads into the site options. And you can see there's all kinds of financial elements, management elements, but that's the heart and soul, particularly as relevant to today's conversation. Next slide. One of the big questions is who's going to own it, who's going to run it? So the preferred option right now in the study is similar to the Boston Sports Institute in Wellesley, where the town puts together this model of what they're looking for, what the priority uses are, and then goes out with an RFP to a developer to actually build the facility and run it. That is the preferred example. Other option, traditional town-funded, owned and operated, or a hybrid where the town's funded but goes as an outsource to outside companies that could run certain programs or certain elements within the venue. Next slide. The important part, benefits for Westford schools. And I'll start with athletic programs, because that's and the student athletes, because that's one thing that really jumps out at all of us first. Increasing participation. That is critical, and I would stress the second and third bullet point. Increasing the equity and access for improved team participation and equity across the student body, and eliminating the barrier of transportation to that access to these sports teams. Because right now they're traveling a great length, distance to participate in off-site facilities outside of Westford, and at all kinds of weird hours, and getting home late or going out to a practice at 5 in the morning. The second is the priority practice time. Right now, your teams are third, fourth, fifth priority. This would enable it to be priority time, and we've really identified what those are in working with the groups. It's really controlling your own destiny. And then the priority game time, same thing. Next slide, the home pool or the home arena environment. There's no place our teams can call home. The ability to have your team signage, your recognition of your student athletes, the recognition of team success, even your school colors reflected in the color schemes. But also the logistic support, the opportunity for specific locker rooms for your teams, secure storage area for the equipment. All these things, workspace for coaches. This is all critical to helping really develop the overall programs. If we go to the next, it goes well beyond what just is the benefits for the athletic and the student athletes. It's for all aquatic programs, adaptive PE. We spend quite a bit of time talking with CPAC about that. Special needs programming that are not currently offered as it relates to the benefits of aquatics. Certification training program, lifeguard programs, the ability to create jobs, create opportunities for community engagement for your students, and volunteerism. All these things are very important, but then also look at extracurricular activities, aquatic lifestyle activities, all very important, particularly in an environment where there's a lot of water surrounding us. The next, talk about what is the budget impact. Not much of an impact in terms of the cost of rental facilities, but the value proposition is really important. When you have that control, you have the time you need, when you need it, and you have the priority. But it also significantly reduces transportation costs. It can reduce staffing costs because there's so much added cost generated by time for travel and out-of-town practice and events. Hosting home meets, generating revenue, generating support. Really, it helps support the Booster Club too. They can become much more involved in supporting your programs because we know that more and more athletics are really funded that way. And again, helping attract students to Westford schools. Next slide. All these things have a much broader community engagement. So I want to make sure you all understand that the schools are part of this, but there's much more multi-generational and intergenerational programming that really benefits all aspects of the community in all the elements within this. So that really sums up our approach. And again, now program leads into design. And I'll turn it over to Gary.
Great, thanks, Stu. If we could go to the next slide, please. We missed a slide in there somewhere on sites. So how does it all fit together? We take a program model, as Stu was talking about. We have an ice arena, we have an aquatics facility, we have locker rooms, we have all the things that support these various spaces, and how do they come together? So we build a program model. It's not a building. We're not suggesting this as a piece of architecture yet. It's simply taking the bits and pieces from a spreadsheet, putting them together to scale so we know about what kind of size these things need to be, and putting their relationships together. So we're looking at how much space do we need for locker rooms, and we're not looking at what are the configurations of locker rooms, if you will. We're not designing anything just yet. It's just saying what kind of things need to touch each other. So the three main venues on those slides that will generate quickly into floor plans, this is fine, thank you, will generate into the aquatics facility, and it's a 2-pool aquatics facility. There's a small gymnasium facility. There's an ice arena facility. And each of these is born out from the meetings and the user group conferences that were done as part of the study to determine what's there. So this builds off of going back to the master plan, recreation master plan, and the town-wide survey said a pool or an ice sheet. Well, okay, what kind of pool? How big is the pool? Who's going to use the pool? What are the programs in the pool? And from that, we build these first and second floor diagrams. These buildings tend to be very heavy footprint buildings. So, you think a gym, an ice sheet, a locker room, a pool, they're always on the first floor, just about always on the first floor. And that can become challenging when you think about trying to find a site. So we do include some second floor space for spectator viewing and for a walking and jog track, which was another significant component that the community had a strong interest in, both as part of the master plan and the survey and in conversations with user groups. And we can look at the next slide. So how do we take those building components and try and fit them together on a site? We started looking around the community, even at the very start of this process, looking around the community for sites. And we have an idea about what kind of space this facility will take up. So it's not too soon to start looking. We wanted to find a site that's in the right place, that wouldn't cause traffic problems, that's not in a flood zone or in a wetland zone, that's not on the slope of a hill, that won't impact too many people in too many bad ways. Westford's a good-sized community for its population. It's fairly spread out. There's lots of land, so it would seem, if you come in from somewhere else and look at it. But there's not that many sites to build a facility like this. So if we look at all of those potential options, we were able to pick out 7 different sites across the town, and they're shown on the map all over. They sort of covered the range north to south and east and west. And we scored those in a matrix against those earlier criteria I was just looking at. Where does it fit in town? How does it serve people in town? Will it cause a traffic jam? Will it serve the school and its students? Will it be an impact on any abutters? And we came up with 2 leading sites, one at Farmer Way, which is actually 2 sites we'll look at the Farmer Way complex, and one right here at the Abbott School parcel. Farmer Way scored head and shoulders above all of the other sites in the study. The Abbott School scored fairly close with 2 other sites, but has a number of criteria that make it far more advantageous than VFW and the NAB, which were close in the scoring. And we can look at that. So we'd like to look at these 2 sites. Farmers Way, so the concept numbers, I apologize, they start at B. We've developed A through H, and we're only going to show you a few of those tonight. So rather than walking all the way through.
The other ones are secret.
That was not a that was not a Google problem. That's starting at B. So we're looking at the lots to the east side of Farmers Way, and these are lots 110 and 113. They are town-owned lots. They're controlled by the select board. And looking at how to develop up on those 2 upper parcels. So here were 2 concepts of looking at how to build on that upper parcel of land. You can see the building shape follows that planning diagram that we looked at earlier. And sort of how could you fit on these awkward shaped parcels up on the site there? It's a little hard to fit the building, but it could do so. The first option fit the building entirely within its site. This next parcel, option, concept C, does cheat over the side of the sightline and leans a little closer to Stony Brook School. And so we started looking at the Farmer Way parcel as a whole and said, okay, if you looked at this comprehensively, is there a way that this center and the school work well together, or do these want to be further apart? Which leads us to look at different boundary lines on the site. So if we go to the next slide, this concept started to look at the field site on the west side of Farmers Way and said, well, could you possibly take those fields and put them up on the higher side, on the east side, and give yourself a more discrete parcel of land? It's a flatter parcel of land. It's a little more readily developable for a building. It's further away from abutters. There's some good options to consider about how a building in this location might engage very differently with a school and make a complex that's much more holistic than simply putting a building up in those upper parcels. Those are some of the options and opportunities that we looked at Farmer Way. I think we have one.
I
oh, certainly.
skipped B awfully quickly, so I just wanted to give people a chance to see B where it's within that parcel.
Certainly. We have handouts of these as well we can give to the group that's here. I realize it
I have
doesn't
an
help at
itchy
home.
trigger finger, apparently.
Not a problem.
So it's the orange structure that's moving, right?
Yes.
Yes, I apologize.
No, it's
The
okay.
building, and then parking lot. The gray is the parking lot.
Yes.
The school.
Okay, thank you.
And those are the playing fields at
My
Stony
cursor,
Brook.
okay, my cursor does show up.
Okay,
People at home.
that's very
Where they're
helpful.
currently there. Yeah, it took
Rec
me.
center,
a
parking.
There you go,
So
exactly.
proud of
Gary,
these
what are the
guys.
green squares in this?
The green squares are existing fields. There's two lacrosse fields, multi-use soccer and lacrosse fields there
grass
presently.
fields, yeah.
Yep, they are grass fields, not turf
Then we're just
fields.
we're gonna like, in G, we're just gonna slice them. Just a bunch of people are gonna carry them.
That's correct.
exactly
That's correct.
right.
You keep the markings intact if you get them in the right place.
It's gonna be a crane. Stop it.
And build them up on the upper site and then build a recreation center on the lower. And we're showing, in each of these, we're showing a minimum of around 300 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Going through the schedule matrix that Stu described, we've come up with a sort of regular use load, not during a swim meet and not during an ice arena event, but a regular use load maximum of around 210 vehicles needed.
And we have broken that out by hour of the day during the school year, so we can see how it complements, because it really picks up when school lets out. So we sat there during the transition and watched people leave when we would come in. So, yeah.
It was
Spent
good.
a couple hours out there.
It was very helpful to actually watch traffic flow out of the school on a school day, on a snow day at that, which helped make things really congested. So there's some interesting opportunities with the way the timing of the recreation center schedule works and the timing of the school works to look at things like shared parking on the site as a whole and to think about, again, if you can combine some of these facilities, and we don't know if you can, but if you can, there's some great opportunity there to build less, to make less impervious area, to have to do less infrastructure. So that next one down, the next site that we looked at that scored well is the Abbott School site right here. You can see the Abbott School and Millennium School towards the top of that slide, left and right respectively. Thank you, Chris. And this option says we look at that same planning diagram. We've shifted the parts around a little bit just to mirror things, but it sits on the site up where Memorial Field is. And in this particular diagram, we have built 2 parking trays to serve the building, one on each side of Fisher Way. And we've been able to maintain one of the smaller sides. There's 2 fields striped up here. Just up the hill behind us. One is a sort of 150 by 250 small field, and the other is a full-size 160 by 360 field. So a building could fit in this site. It spreads out a little bit, but it's one way to look at it. And then another option of thinking about the Abbott School. And again, these are C and D. There is an A and B. They're not quite as attractive, I don't think, as this. This one uses a very compact footprint for the building. We've basically turned the ice arena 90 degrees, so you get a much smaller footprint for all of this programming. And we did start to say, okay, what happens if you take Fisher Way, which does have residences on it? It's an active street, but once you get into the school property, it only serves the access into the school. And so could you take Fisher Way and actually reshape it to give yourself a larger development area? And that lets us keep a sort of true Memorial Field, the larger 160 by 360 field, on the northern part of that site, with a pretty good field orientation as well. So that's a different way to approach it. Again, showing a similar 200 or 210. This is a 220 vehicle parking area. To think about how you could do that to support the facility on its own, and then if there's opportunities after school time to have shared parking as well on a site like this.
All right, well, thank you guys. So that was really well done, and I appreciate you doing it pretty quickly. So what we're hoping to do as sort of next steps is, one, finish the study. So we've got some work to do there, and then our next meeting will be with the select board, hopefully in June. But what we're really hoping for tonight is to get some measure of support from you all regarding the sites that we've selected, because as you've picked up on, they're all next to schools, right? So we want you all to feel comfortable with that. Any sort of measure of support obviously is not saying that we're going to move forward and build something tomorrow. There's a lot more steps in the process. So If we get to the select board and, you know, that goes well, we might ask for their support to move forward to issue an RFP, like you heard about this evening. And that might just provide us with more information, right? One, is there a developer out there that may want to do something with the town of Westford or not? And if it's not, then that's good information. If there is somebody out there willing and we get some good proposals back, we fully expect to bring that back to this group as well as the select board and have more meaningful conversations based off of that data. So this evening is really to give us hopefully a vote of confidence that we can then go to the select board and say, we've talked with the school committee, this is their support or their concerns or a mixture of both, so that they feel that, you know, we've done due diligence from that perspective. And lastly, if we do move forward with the RFP, I would love to structure a working group with perhaps a member of this committee being part of that group to develop the RFP and then to go through any review of proposals that we receive back. So you don't have to let us know this evening about that, but just keep in mind that if we do get to that point, I'll be approaching you all, and hopefully one or more of you may be interested in helping out in that regard.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Can I?
Let's have some discussion, some questions.
So can I hear a little bit more about the traffic patterns? Because I feel like that's what parents are going to be concerned about in large part. Like, what is the information that you all have gathered about how this might impact those high traffic times at schools, at those two particular schools?
Want to take that, Gary?
Certainly. We haven't run full traffic analysis on these sites yet. Certainly, it's a little premature to do that without some further input from you folks and further from the town. The timing of the recreation center and the schedule that's been developed for that does fit quite well. As I said, its busiest times are between 4 and 8 p.m. Its busiest times of day. So it's most busy during the school day. It's most school week. It's most busy after school hours. Now, the biggest challenge I think we have with traffic at either location is thinking about that transition time when traffic is outflowing from the school and traffic may be inflowing to the recreation center. And so something, yes, exactly. And so something like, if we look at the Farmer Way parcel, there's one way in and one way out of that parcel.
Yeah,
now,
that's what I was thinking too.
On the times we were there, it cleared quite nicely. It was a big buildup. There was a lot of traffic as the buses came out, but by the time the buses cleared the site, vehicular traffic, private vehicle traffic cleared the site pretty well. That's not to say that increased traffic counts and trip ends to that with a recreation center might not warrant a light or warrant some improvements or warrant something that is unpalatable and makes that site off limits.
I would say that makes sense in terms of the actual school schedule. Mm-hmm. You said you did it in the snow.
Yes.
Which the one thing to consider is just how well used that complex is with after school activities, with spring sports, with fall sports, and then just on the weekends because of all of those fields and the track that's down there. It wouldn't impact necessarily buses, right? Because you're right, the usage time. But I just think that is a high volume campus.
Certainly.
So it's something to think about.
Yep, it sure is.
Can I just come in on that? I know we're saying that the kind of busy hours we're thinking is between 4 and 8, but the high school finishes much earlier before any of the other schools.
Right.
So, I mean, if they have practices, if they're using this for practices, or I'm assuming any kind of meets or home games that we're hosting there are all potentially happening before 4 p.m. So we potentially do have an impact on the actual school times that Abbott.
Except WA and the middle schools have the same schedule.
True. So it would only be Abbott then that they would potentially be impacting.
Yeah. And what we did, we talked about this. You can't see the detail, but this is a very pretty colorful matrix that is a very detailed schedule model. Yeah. And then we built this based on this, all the user groups, and we factored in when the high school teams would start to practice, when outside user groups. All the high school, the WA events are evenings. You know, they're not right after school. You know, maybe some of the spring sports are, but when you talk hockey, when you talk swimming and diving, they're after school. So we took a look. by hour of that traffic and tried to make sure we were building in that transition time. Because when users come in after school, they're not going immediately from school there. There's usually, pick up, drop off, handover. So it's,
The other call out I would add to that is that, the primary user groups of this facility are winter sports, right? Where, we typically see conflict potentially, like you pointed out, Dr. Chu, about the fields. That's, fall or spring sports. So we do have that benefit as well.
That's a good point.
Traffic is one of the items that made us look at that west side Farmer Way option, because there's a great opportunity to come into the complex as a whole and to immediately get off the traffic lane, come into the site, and come back out of the site without ever getting down towards the school itself, and you don't have to cross left to get in and left to get out again.
Right.
So there's some nice opportunities from a traffic standpoint.
Just bringing that up for.
Oh, thank you, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Look at you go.
Much handier. And again, there's 4 iterations of it on this side and 4 iterations of it on that side. So there's a number of loops to be made, but the traffic flow generally works better in this parcel on this, on Farmer Way. Abbott School, I agree, is, oh yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Gary. Finish
I was just
your
going to
thought.
say, Abbott School does present a different host of conditions, and we really tried to understand it. I don't think we have yet a full enough understanding of Fisher Way and how that loop feeds. We came here at dismissal time as well, and traffic was coming in sort of both, streaming in both ends. And while the bus loop seems very well defined, and there seemed to be plenty of room for queuing, the traffic pattern was a little hard to discern. And so we'd like to, if this site is even feasible, we'd study it much more to understand how that traffic flow really comes into and out of the school.
Come and study it during Carnival.
Yes, well, there you go.
Yeah, we've heard about that.
Yes. And that was one of the goals for keeping the large field as well, actually, is to make sure we could still host the carnival on site. It's an important part of it.
Sean and then Glory.
Yeah, I mean, it just, at least for me, like conceptually, right, without getting into the site determinations and stuff, like we have this award-winning, swim team and an excellent hockey team, and it's like, I mean, it's just a no-brainer. Like Westford should have something like this, and it's nothing against Skate 3. I mean, it's a fine facility, but the fact that we have an opportunity for having a Westford-centric venue just seems like a great idea, and I love it. But it just, so I wonder if Chris or Carrie, if you guys have an opinion on this. Like, do we have another facility that has, or a different school in the area that has a facility that could potentially be this close to a school? Like something comparable that would have.
Do we have a facility in town that would be this close to a school, like another type of facility?
Right.
No.
I just wonder, like, is there, I mean, it's just the reality whenever, things get more industrialized and stuff, but is there any, like, school safety thing that we're not thinking of outside of traffic patterns or, having a facility like this next to a school?
When you do think in terms of, I think when you think of the 2 different sites that they've looked at, the Farmer Way piece where they're looking at, I can't remember if you said it was the east or west, but when it went into where the fields are and moving the fields, that is still already a significant distance from the school. It's visible to the school, but it's still significantly far away. And I don't think that having a facility like this that is also, while I also want to be clear that this is not an educational facility, that's not what we're looking at. I mean, it's a town piece. It has educational components to it, and I feel like we already have a great partnership with all of the town, with all the different town departments in terms of our emergency response to things. So I don't think that building a facility like this on that campus would create a concern that doesn't already exist just in an open society, right? It's closer in Abbott here, and so it's a little bit harder for me to sort of imagine the magnitude of the building. Like when you talk about putting it on that field, I'm like, I guess I just don't see that. But that's just because I'm not sure how far that goes back. Whereas I know the Stony Brook facility very well, and I can see both of those parcels, and I can see the one where it's up on the hill and it's coming over. I feel like that in itself, I'll just say, is a distraction, right? The construction of it would definitely be a distraction to middle school students. But in itself, that's a limited time, right? But I would just say that would be, so I would say if you thought that one site was better than another, having it further from the schools is always better, just for even those purposes. But I think the site down on Farmer Way, I'm concerned about the traffic, but I think you talked through that and the fact that it's a bigger, it's a higher volume in the winter. I think that would be a better location, but again, it's not our land. It's not school property.
Right.
And I kind of just want to continue to reiterate, I know you're asking for support, but I want to reiterate that this is not the school department asking for this, because we have our own critics about our budget, and we don't necessarily want people to think that we're looking to, build a pool.
Do you have something to that, or should we go to
I was just going to add that, to Sean's point, that Farmers Way is not isolated and
Right.
only school traffic either, right? There's private residences down there as well.
And you did say you talked about the residential traffic. You watched a little bit of that as well, too.
Yes, that's
right?
correct, coming in and out of the site and going down to the residences just at the southern end of that property.
It would impact more. There are more residents there than on Fisher Way.
I just meant it's not a school isolated
Exactly.
complex
Right.
with only
It's
school traffic
multifunctional
that
as
now
is.
you're introducing a non-school entity. It's also got private
The
roads.
tracks are there too.
Yes,
Good point.
right.
Yep.
Certainly, access to the
And trails and
trailways,
everything. Yes.
exactly, to East Boston.
Laura, you okay if I do a follow-up
Sure.
to Sean's as well, then we'll get to you?
Sure.
Just as far as security, I know Chris and I spoke, and I was thinking back to about 4 or 5 years ago when the dog park discussion came to this committee on the same, presumably on the same parcel up there.
That's correct, yes.
And we did take a vote at that moment. I think we voted not to, I don't remember, not to support, I believe, right? Yeah. But I think it's a little different. And there were concerns about security, right? Like, you have people coming to the dog park. But to me, there's a difference in facilities where you're talking about a facility where people are going to go indoors. They're targeting to go indoors. They're presumably going to have a card that they're swiping to get in. And so you're not, it's a little less of an open concept of just people showing up and being outside. I mean, not that people can't do that anyway with the fields and with the trails as is. I wouldn't see the building adding outside persons to Farmers Way that maybe leaves people to wonder who's coming in and things like that. I think it would be pretty well regulated.
And the other thing that's changed in 4 to 5 years is the great work by our town and school safety task force, right?
Yep.
So our buildings feel a lot different than they did 4 or 5 years ago.
Laura?
So I'll start this by saying my husband grew up in Michigan, and I know in a lot of other states, like, schools are required to teach students how to swim as part of their physical education. We don't have that in this state. I kind of wish we did, but I am certainly a supporter of having our students have access to this. Sean mentioned absolutely the historic, history of excellence of our swim and dive teams, even the legend of our seniors liking to convince the freshmen that there's a pool on the 3rd floor of Westford Academy. There's a lot of history here.
Well, they tell the middle school students there's a pool at Stony Brook, too.
Oh, do they?
Still
Now there might
be.
So, I want to be supportive of this as a community member and as a parent, but as a school committee member, I have to play the naysayer, I think, and express my concern that, as you pointed out yourselves, despite the size of our town, there are a limited number of sites that are buildable sites in this town. There is a limited amount of funding in this town. We're all well aware of that. So, and I'm thinking in my mind of other community priorities that have been discussed in very recent times. The library expansion, the town center building, which would provide facilities for our facilities department and our technology department, which are shared between town and schools. And not to mention the fact that we are currently holding this meeting in a, quote, temporary building. So we also still have a need that is going to become very critical in the next X period of years for a school administration building. And we don't know where that is going to be cited. And I, as much as I want to support this idea in theory, I don't know how, as a committee member, to make the trade-offs between those other community priorities and the priorities for the school system, particularly for a school administration building, versus this project. You know.
I think those are great comments and feedback. And just want to point out that, again, the preferred option would be something that the town would not be looking to fund themselves, right? So this would be in following the Wellesley model. How they structured things is they did a land lease in which the town received, I think, $260, $280, something along those amounts per year from the developer. The developer built and runs the facility. You know, the town would still have to pay for programming time, much the same way we do that today. But it's not like we would be sitting there trying to raise $20 million to build it and, you know, be at competition with the library or the town center building or a school administration's building. So hopefully that helps a little bit from a budgetary perspective, that we don't see the proposal going forward would be to go for a municipally built building. We'd like to see a developer build it and run it.
Yeah, that is reassuring in terms of funding. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily reassuring in terms of sites, because we know from the dog park a couple of years ago, surprise, Stony Brook came up on that list. Some of the other sites you mentioned came up on that list. There are a limited number of sites here, and when we, you know, looked at possibilities for the school administration building, one of them was here at Abbott. Mm-hmm. So I have an intrinsic discomfort with voicing school committee support for this as if it was in a vacuum. If I could take the vote in a vacuum, well, sure, I'm supporting this. Great, this is awesome. Let's get a pool in Westford. Let's get an ice hockey rink. It would be great for our students. It'd be great for the community. But I can't make that vote in isolation.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny, Gloria, you kind of saying, I'm kind of similar thinking in that I know we ourselves have been talking about a feasibility study, you know, of looking at the entire district and the buildings. And so I kind of feel like, you know, having some of that kind of information would also be really helpful before kind of supporting for these specific sites. Love the idea. You know, I took part and I spoke with you all in various forms about it. And I think the other thing I'd love to kind of see is a bit more in terms of discussion on actually the costs. I know you're saying that, you know, yes, we probably wouldn't have to pay transport fees because we're not busing students to towns further around. But if to kind of clarify what is the town kind of getting into their budget and what is it costing us then to rent these facilities. I mean, it is a private developer. I'm assuming they wouldn't be doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. So there's a profit there, and I don't want it to be putting, you know, Westford schools and their budgets in a disadvantage in any way in terms of, you know, these kind of cost discussions further along. And my also, you know, and I came at this from, I know we spoke a lot about it in the CPAC conversation about really the accessibility for families to use this facility, and in terms of the cost for them, you know, as soon as you start bringing so many private groups in to provide these facilities, you kind of lose maybe the accessibility for families to some extent who may not be able to afford some of the fees and the costs associated with some of these programs. So you know, I struggle with the completely private aspect of it. However, I understand that in order to kind of maybe bring a facility like this here, that's also the way to go. So I have some kind of concerns.
Let me address how we look at that from the programmatic standpoint.
Yeah.
We have worked on several of these type partnerships around the country, including we worked on it at Wellesley on behalf of the town to help develop it. And then we eventually ended up helping the developer put the program together. There are a lot of ways when you're doing that RFP and then crafting the land lease to put those kind of criteria in place. Specifically call out, the priority groups, the user groups, what the school programs would get, how you may have to treat residents separately, what are the community-based programs that really you still try to capture because it's part of the community mission that you don't want to lose in the for-profit scenario. So it's a fine line to walk, but it's when we look at the keys to making that kind of development partnership successful, it's really understanding what those mission-driven elements are when you put the RFP out and negotiate it, because you've got to deal with that up front.
So can I just?
I'm gonna go with Valerie.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, are you jumping right off that?
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so is the vote that you're asking for is just to develop the RFP, right?
That's right.
Specifically, so it's not that we're saying that we're going to, we're putting it, we're requesting proposals, and then proposals come in, and then we can decide not to do any of them.
We're looking specifically for you as a committee to be comfortable with us including one or both parcels as part of an option for an RFP. If we do get the approval to do that, so right, we obviously have to have the select board approval. At that point, we will be notifying abutters of either one or both of these parcels to come to that meeting. So the select board will want to hear feedback from abutters. The select board will have obviously other concerns and considerations that we'll have to address. And if we do get past all that and they do approve us to go forward and do the RFP, yes, then we will potentially get something back in terms of a workable proposal. And then based off of that information, we take next steps. And that might be, well, we're going to put a facility on the west side of Farmers Way. That's the proposal. Come back to you all. Maybe we've gotten farther along with the school administration study, for example, right? That can run concurrently with us developing an RFP and issuing it. There's a whole heck of a lot of other aspects to this that we probably will have to consider before we ever see a facility built. From a land use perspective, for example, there might be zoning issues that we have to work through as a community for probably both of these. So I just want to be clear that it's not like we're going to be turning around and unfortunately building this tomorrow. So yeah, this is just to get us to that sort of next step to make the select board feel like you've gotten at least done some due diligence and you've reached out to the school committee, heard their concerns, and that's what they want to basically get feedback for. We want to get feedback for.
I was going to echo actually about narrowing the scope, because I think that's helped me. I mean, there's so much that the presentation, I mean, I think we saw like a third of it, right? Like there's so much there. So for me, narrowing my thoughts on it for tonight has been really helpful about, as a school committee member, do I have issues with those sites? Whether I think as a taxpayer, the site, whatever else, right? I'm trying to put that aside. But I would also say something that came up in our conversation today, Chris, that I thought is also worth mentioning, is that certainly there are trade-offs, but one of the benefits that came up in our conversation was how this could play into later school start times. And I just wouldn't want that to lose sight of this, because I know it's been a priority of this committee. And I don't know whether you or Jeff would be able to speak to that better, but it certainly could play into the activity timing and extracurricular programming, and how this could ultimately help play into that broader goal.
I think that is an important consideration that I can speak to. The fact is that there is just not a lot of pool space available to anyone within a reasonable amount of travel distance. Same thing with hockey time, rink time. So what I've understood is that if the schools change their start time, the ability for the schools to support these programs is substantially jeopardized. I mean, when the swim team lost the University of Lowell and then struck out to find another home, they looked at 13 different locations. Fortunately, Westford took us in and has been a very supportive partner, and we're very appreciative of that. But it's probably unlikely that if we have to start practice at 4 o'clock, that they can continue to support us. And the same difficulties with hockey. So it's a real consideration for us to keep in mind that a facility like this, as we pointed out in the presentation, allows us to control our own destiny. Part of that agreement we would have with the developer is the schools would be able to set priority usage time which would allow us to have the flexibility to change school start times but not impact some of our programming offerings.
Thanks for that.
Chris, I just have a clarifying
Yeah,
question.
please.
I understand you're not near the design phase yet, but for a building this size, what is the typical amount of parking spaces that you would expect to have?
I'll start first with that. Based on the user analysis we did, user load, we are looking at peak times during the day, which again, late afternoon, right at the early evening set. We're at about 225 to 230 for the entire complex of daily user cars. We get more people, but we factored in that when we get to those later hours, we have more drop-offs, people aren't parking and things. So we then know that we will have some events, but we felt that going up to 300 parking spaces in these designs gave us a significant buffer, really about a 20% added buffer to our parking to make sure we're really well taken care of that. But again, depending on the site, there may be shared parking, which gets more into how you've worked it in with existing sites.
So the idea of the shared parking really is to help accommodate for those large events, a swim meet event, an ice arena event, where you need to have a buffer of a couple hundred additional vehicles over that 210, 220 daily use number, presuming that you really packed a dual meet, swim meet in that facility. And so that's where saying, okay, if where land is a critical component, to find a piece of land and to be able to build parking for that many vehicles is really a challenge. And it's not a great development model either to pave that much space. And so that's where the idea of being able to work with some existing parking facilities at either site really can help make that plan much more feasible and viable.
And we tried to build that on home hockey games, dual county league championships in swimming and diving, and things that would really be suitable for the level of the teams you have here at Westford Academy.
Okay, and so the Abbott land is already accounted for in terms of it would fit the building as well as that many parking spots, and or would we be sharing spaces with people? Like, would it be a separate parking spot, or when you're talking about shared, it means with the people who are at this building as well as the Abbott School?
So it would be on a daily usage pattern, the facility would have enough parking to accommodate that.
Correct.
If you had a night hockey game or you had a weekend swimming tournament or something like that, that's where the expectations of potentially using some of the school parking might come into play when there isn't
Right.
school in session, right? So there isn't that conflict.
Yeah. But not
Or
during
really-
daily use.
Or really popular school committee meeting.
Yes, that's
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, the parking, the overflow works both ways.
Yes, that's a good point.
That's right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Did you have a comment?
No, you haven't said anything, please. No, I mean, you kind of all went around, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have more of a wrap-up comment, so let's go to yours.
Well, I guess mine was like, I guess, Chris, what are you looking for us tonight? Like a formal vote, or I mean, you've said that
I
you
was gonna
wanted
answer
to
that
hear. Okay, so all right, Chris.
I'm gonna go.
Shout out to Chris.
Okay,
Cut him off.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's a great presentation. I really appreciate like all the information. As Valerie said, there's more out there. I encourage people to look at that. A lot of you've thought about every question we've had. I feel like has been thought about, and it's just sort of undeniable how beneficial having those facilities for our athletic teams would be. I think the transportation alone is a huge factor, and I just think about our swim and dive team who has been traveling for so many years and excelled despite of that, or in spite of that. So I certainly am attracted by the possibility. I echo Gloria's concern. I mean, my first reaction, I think when we talked to you, probably came through, was like budget. That was my, I'm very heartened to hear of these models that have worked in places like Wellesley. I certainly think we'll want to hear more as this progresses about what are the real details of that. But it sounds promising that we wouldn't be, sacrificing something else that this town or this school department needs for this. I think that's really important. Weighing that with the community accessibility aspect, like the more, like you said, it feels like the more privatized it is, maybe the less accessible for everybody in the community. It's a trade-off, and it sounds like you have a lot of experience, like looking at those trades. So I feel a lot better about that now. Geography is the other issue. Are we giving up a parcel that we might need? I think Carrie, you can probably help with this. When we looked at administration buildings, we looked at a number of sites in town. Was anything on Farmers Way in the mix? I know
Yes, the annex area. It was ranked kind of lower because of the location, not being centralized to the schools, but it was on the list of the top 5.
And Abbott was one of the top 2.
Yeah, Abbott was the second, with the first being 63 Main, which would no longer be an option.
Okay. So, I mean, and this is not a super well-informed thought, but I certainly, personally, I mean, I'm saying this is just gut more than analysis that you have done, but I mean, the Farmers Way parcel looks so much more accessible, flexible. You know, if you had to widen a road, it feels like you have room to widen a road. It feels like adding a stoplight would maybe be less disruptive than adding one on Depot.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, I'm just kidding. We would never add a stoplight anywhere. But it feels to me like Farmers Way is just, I just think of the traffic and coming through the center of town from all different directions as is. Again, uninformed gut feeling, but now to the question of like, what do we do tonight? I don't know, you know, what the support looks like or lack of support, or if we take a vote, it's tricky. It's not our property. It's not our parcels. It's not school department land. That makes me less inclined to take a vote, but I'm open to thoughts on that, and more inclined to give general feedback and maybe some, you know, general sense of where the support is and where the questions are.
So just one call out. So if we did look at the land swap, right, where we had the facility on where the current fields are, that is school committee owned land, if you will. Yeah, so.
That's not town-owned?
No.
The fields,
The fields are
Fields
school
are school.
committee.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that makes sense then. why
And
we
that
asked.
upper level is town.
That's correct.
On the other side is
Okay.
the
Closer
select
to the
board
school.
parcels.
So ironically, the one thing that I was just going to share as feedback, because that's what you're looking for, not that it has any impact on the conversation, but for feedback for you, if you flipped that, those fields would be more accessible to the school.
Correct.
Correct.
Which they're not, because no one goes all the way over there.
Yeah.
And Stony Brook has a beautiful campus, but when you have a JV team and a freshman team, and one's on the back field and one's on the front field, it would be easier to have all that, and you would have more of the school, because the space that's there now is unusable.
Yeah.
So you would be improving student access to those fields if you did that swap.
Bringing them closer. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think
And that
I've
was the thing
ever
I was
seen
looking at.
anyone
You were
on that.
going to, the design would be to create something similar in space. The design clearly would be different, but the idea would be that there would be,
Correct, 2 fields up on that site.
yeah.
Not to mention, it would seem that there would almost be like a buffer between the facility and the school if it were done that way through the residential properties that are kind of set back out there. You know, it would make it, at least if I'm picturing this correctly, it would make it seem like the school was more distant from the facility versus if it was the first one on the left when you're coming down, right? Yeah.
It's also, this may or may not impact the main decisions, but you might have some very angry people. That is an unbelievably popular sledding location for children.
So
And
we
you're
have to work
thinking
that
about
in.
that?
Oh,
Work that in.
field?
It's
Oh,
also
yeah.
slow.
For all of the people who live behind
No,
there?
no, and.
Right here, this is
Yeah,
all,
it's Stony Brook.
all winter long,
Yeah.
kids are sledding.
Yep.
All
That's a
along
great
there.
call.
Yeah.
So
We
I
make
grew
that
up
work.
in Sudbury, right? And so when they redid the high school, they put the high school on the field, which was the main sledding
Yeah.
field. And I remember everyone like, oh, you can't take
So I
away
mean,
our
that might be
sledding.
something that you
Yeah.
still,
Something for the RFP.
It's a winter
Yeah.
activity.
We can put that in there.
Sledding hill.
Slide right into the ice skating rink,
Yeah,
right?
open the doors, they slide all the way.
That's We can work with that.
Okay, Minnie Chen,
It's good feedback.
you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I actually have a comment. I actually really like the private partner public partnership because actually it gets some money revenue for the town, which the town doesn't get. it actually helps our school budget as well because we don't have to actually spend a lot of money to other places or like busing the kids around, and also like it's we got priority time how to this facility. I think there are like a couple proposals. The Abbott proposal, I think we're going to have a lot of concern about because like it's so close to the Abbott school, and then center of town, the traffic probably is going to be a nightmare, and we don't know if you can actually afford that building. So really, like, I'm more intrigued by the Farmers Way property. No matter if it's going to be a swap of the field or like it's the current configuration built on top of it, right? So I think in either case, I think that's a great opportunity for us to finally put our like student team to be proud of to train in the town.
Thank you. Yes, Gloria.
As the one who probably spoke the strongest in terms of the naysaying, I will say I would have a much higher comfort level with if we are conditioning our support, our theoretical support of this on better understanding the funding and the condition being that the school budget is not negatively impacted in any way, and that, as we've kind of indicated, we're not trying to portray this to the community as the schools are building this. And I know you aren't doing that, but I don't want other people misunderstanding our support in that way. And then also in terms of the sites, I would have the highest level of discomfort with Abbott. We are talking a 3 to 5 school. We have considered it as a possibility for a school admin building. It sounds like it has some other challenges in terms of traffic flow and space. It doesn't have the same level of space. There is, at Stony Brook, we are talking about a middle school, and it does have a larger space. If you're talking about the swap option, it is further from the school, and there might be some advantages to the school in having those fields then more accessible. So especially given your familiarity with that property, if you have a comfort level with that, and if you as administration would indicate that that wasn't a very appealing site for a school admin building, I'm inching towards a higher comfort level.
I think in general, the town does need to just continue to watch the traffic there in general, because just as a school, there are concerns about Route 40. There's concerns about Farmers Way onto Route 40. So any addition is going to create a problem there. But the way that you just put that, Gloria, if the town decided to move forward with this, then I think the schools could benefit from that swap. And yes, it's far from the school. I feel like it makes sense with the complex that already exists. So I think that of the choices, that would be, I think, the best choice.
We don't have to necessarily pick any sites. I mean, what we could just, do we even have to vote on it? I mean, can we say to charge Chris as chair to email select board our support to continue the process and investigation?
Yeah,
to get further information
We
further
definitely
down
don't
the
have to
road.
vote. I'm
Yeah.
I'm like kind of loathe the vote a little bit.
Yeah,
just
because it makes it
it's a
formal
very
for
official
nothing.
endorsement of something that I feel like we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping you're getting a sense of what we're thinking and our comfort level, which is a comfort level certainly to look more at especially the Farmers Way site, thinking about funding, thinking about traffic, and in an openness, I think, from the committee and the administration to think about a swap of that land, which is a big key thing, which you thankfully pointed out, it being town-owned or school-owned land. Sean?
Well, and also, Chris, you did say that you were looking for potential membership on an RFP committee. I mean, if you are looking for it, I'd be happy to. I mean, we can figure it out after the fact.
Great.
But, I mean, that's one way that we would have, our board would have input into a potential site, correct?
That's exactly right. That's why I wanted to have that participation. So we keep a permanent town building committee, somebody from FinCom, maybe a select board member, Park and Rec, you know, a multidisciplinary committee that would work on the development of the RFP. That was sort of my goal, and I think that will give us as a community the best chance of getting a good product in the end.
And besides it, and not needing a specific vote, I'm sure that questions would come to you. Have you talked to the school committee about this land?
Yes.
And have you been in those conversations? Have they been able to ask questions? And so I think for you to be able to say, yes, we are in conversations with the school committee, we've talked to them about that, they're aware, they're answering, I think that will be the bigger thing, is you are able to do that now.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, just judging off of the comments I've heard, would you like us not to continue to look at Abbott and just really focus on Farmer Way, which is fine. There's no drawback that I can think of. It actually might make our lives easier if there's really just one parcel that we're looking at in terms of future presentations and conversations about notifying abutters and things of that nature.
Right.
So if the comfort level of this group is to give us sort of that direction, that would be helpful. I'm not hearing dramatic reservations about Abbott, but not really gung-ho, yeah, Abbott's as good as Farmer's Way.
And that there might be other uses for
Then
Abbott.
Abbott probably is going to be very difficult.
What did you say?
He said Abbott's going to be very difficult, it feels like.
And
I don't
my
necessarily-
largest reservation on Abbott is I don't want to give up that potential site for a school admin building until we have a solution for that. If down the road we had another solution for a school admin building and we knew it was going to be elsewhere, would I be more open to talking about Abbott? Sure, but right now I think we kind of got to hang on to it.
Yeah, I'm not saying we would say, drop it completely. I mean, that's sort of, you have to figure out, you kind of weigh those trades, and if maybe there's some things that the Farmer's Way doesn't give that you think Abbott does, and it's worth pursuing. But I get the sense that everyone at this table, or these tables, is not feeling nearly as confident about Abbott as they are about Farmer's Way.
More concerns were expressed.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yes, thank you.
So hopefully that helps, that feedback. Hopefully it doesn't leave an unsatisfied,
No, not at all. I'm very happy with where the conversation went. I think you all feel a little bit more involved, educated about it, and again, we want to continue to partnership with you as this journey unfolds. So this was exactly what I was hoping for. It was just folks that were interested and willing to support further investigation, and that's what we're hoping to bring to the select board and ask for their support to do as well.
And we love hearing the concerns, because that
yeah.
helps us really focus for the final report.
Certainly
and making
informs it.
sure we're, many things we've thought about, but we wanted this is even better context to help us develop that.
Remind us of the date that you're going to select board.
I believe we're shooting for the 14th. That's not set in stone yet. They haven't developed their agenda, but it will be either the 14th or the 28th. Okay.
Understand, we would much rather have this pool than an imaginary pool on the
I
thing.
hear you.
We would much rather have this pool. We just got to work it through. So.
And I know there's some people back there who agree with that and appreciate that you guys coming out to support it as well.
Yeah.
We know that's why you're here. And so that,
In
it's
case
reg-
it wasn't
it's
clear.
registered and noted. Yeah, it's registered and noted. And it's exciting. It's exciting to think about this and to see where this could lead. So appreciate all the good work that went into this. You guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your time this
Thank
evening.
you for coming.
Hopefully, can we get through fees and exes?
Okay, 8:40 item is.
An hour behind.
Oh, there's a typo. It should say 9:40. Is school fees. Good night.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, thank you.
See ya.
I love spirited
Nice
debate.
to meet you guys.
Wow, that's exciting.
It is. I love a spirited debate.
Right. Is this Pash?
Maybe come up. It's the same conversation as last time.
Come on up.
Yeah.
Come on up.
Come on up.
We
Pat.
like
I
you.
don't really have anything else to offer, other than these are by and large the same fees as last year, with the exception of the reinstatement of a formally assessed late fee for bus transportation, which is really not meant as a large revenue generator. It's just meant as a
Incentive.
incentive. Thank you.
I thought she
Laura.
proposed this.
I wasn't here last time, so I wasn't able to ask this question. Just to clarify on the late fee, I'm hoping that the late fee could be waived for a family who moved into the district
Yes,
later.
that's
or-
a true statement.
Or a family who had, some type of change in circumstance, a divorce, a tragedy in a family.
So that
something
hadn't
that-
been
something
called
that-
out, but we
something
would
that-
address each one on a needed basis. So the first had been called out as far as if they weren't here to register in time, there can't be a late fee assessed. We hadn't discussed the second item you bring up, but of course, we're human and we'll be approachable.
Awesome, that was my only concern.
My only question is, do you want each one mentioned in the motion?
What are the thoughts about copying, pasting to the minutes? What do we think about that as a record?
Maybe like as laid out per
Yeah.
the memo?
Yeah.
Or something?
Yeah, we can
I've done
definitely.
that before.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I
So
know
I
it's
do have
numbers.
to tell you, sometimes like when the minutes refer to something, it's not always as easy to
Right.
do research.
Sure.
So it
I
would
think
be.
we often do that, don't we, Nina? We often cut and paste
Nina
tables.
nearly
and-
always has, yeah. Her minutes
Great.
are pretty awesome.
I'm sorry, it's not as exciting as a pool, I know.
You want a budget one?
Absolutely not.
Right, no.
Any other questions?
Go first.
Okay.
Motion to approve the miscellaneous fees and tuition for the 2022-2023 school year as outlined in the memo. And that was just, I was going to do bus separate. So that's that one.
Oh.
So this is like the early arrival option, the music, the parking.
We have a
activity
second. Your first second?
Yeah.
Ever?
Look at me.
Yeah.
Participating.
Any other questions or comments?
Stickers.
All right, calling for a roll vote. Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
He fell asleep.
No, he's right there. Ming Chen, you're muted.
Oh.
Oh, okay, sorry. I said I like 3 times.
Okay. By the way, you can't do that, but you only get one vote. But I'll count your first one as the correct one. That's passes 7-0.
Motion to approve the FY23 bus fees, including a late fee instated after July 15th.
Second.
Actually, August 1st?
Oh.
Is there a typo?
No, it is.
Oh,
It
I'm
says
sorry. I'm
August
reading
1st.
FY20. I'm sorry. I was reading FY20. I
Thank
don't
you,
want to go
Ms.
back to FY20. I'm sorry. Take that back. Amended to effective August 1st, please, for $25 individual and $50 family amount.
Do you still want to second that?
I mean, fool me once.
Okay.
Second.
Any questions? Discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
That passes 7-0.
I'm going to go back for a second. Did you say $50 for a family? Because we didn't say that.
I'm only reading from your memo.
For the late fee?
I just see 25 per student. Did I say 50?
I'm looking at something, Pat, that says $25 late fee per student effective August 1st.
Right.
Why didn't-
I don't.
I thought we had one that
I
said
didn't write
50.
this myself, I promise.
No, I saw one that
Okay,
had
so maybe
50.
it was on a different one. So did I
Yeah.
say $50 a family?
This is dated May 3rd, recommendation and state the late fee.
Yeah.
Proposed FY23 is
I thought we were looking at it, so that's-
$350/850, and then late fee date and individual family amount says effective August 1st, 25/50.
But that
Okay.
was the last one's memo.
So I think
That
you
was
have a
the
different
last
memo, Valerie, because this, right.
The one that's May 5. That's
So
May-
I think what yours is maybe just discuss bus fees and then we created a composite one that has all of the fees. And so it might have dropped.
Let me have this job.
Well, no. They are somewhat in conflict.
Are they in conflict?
Yeah. This memo does say $50.
Yeah.
Okay.
For
So
families.
then the problem
Oh, I
is
see
at
it,
the
and then here.
table. So we'll go with the $50 since that's what it said.
No, there's the most recent
No,
one, sorry.
We voted to approve both.
So the late bus, the late bus only is $50, if anyone's reading that, because I saw that quickly as a late fee, but
That's
that's
late
not.
bus,
So
right.
bus fee says $350 per student, $850 cap per family, $25 late fee per student, effective August 1st.
Okay, so the $50 was not for the family, am I?
For the late bus.
That was the late bus, which is not the late fee.
Well, I was originally reading from
Okay.
a different memo that does say 25/50.
There we go.
That's what I
Okay,
thought
so
I said
that's
too.
where the disconnect is, and that's on my
We just
part.
voted both in the affirmative.
But,
Okay.
But are we comfortable with the idea? I mean, we have a cap for family fee. It makes sense. If someone had a family of 4, we're not going to want to charge them a $100 late fee.
The problem is gonna
So-
be, let's see, child 3,
We won't get anything for child.
which I'm okay with this.
Okay.
This is, like I
Yeah.
said, this is not meant to generate revenue, it's
No.
really
Right.
just meant to, in incentive, yeah.
I believe that's
fine.
what we just voted, that
Yeah.
was your motion.
All these
So I
4-person
think
families are making out like bandits.
We can all do, register late and, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're good, and I apologize that it
No,
was
I-
carried
I-
from one table to
Yeah,
another
thank you
table.
for
doesn't matter.
catching that we had said that, so we now have
It's
clarity on it.
9:45. We've
Yeah,
got to give ourselves a break.
seriously, that was,
Man, I can't even see
We're
straight.
good?
thank you.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
must start drinking coffee.
Okay, we are on
I
to
am gonna start
policies. We
drinking
have
coffee.
our second reading of our 5 policies, P2114, I'm not gonna read them all. Our 5 policies.
Motion to waive the reading of the second reading of those 5 policies.
Second.
All in favor, Marisol?
Aye.
This is to waive the reading, sorry,
Aye.
this is a vote to waive the readings.
Aye.
Catherine said
Aye.
aye. Is that
Aye.
aye? Sean?
Aye.
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Okay, so now we're on to discussing those 5 policies. Policy subcommittee, any new developments, any public comment on those to
There,
speak of?
there was no public comment on these policies. This is our 3rd meeting. We met last week. We don't have any changes to these, so they are recommended as originally presented.
And as we know, Erica Cole from the Sustainability Committee helped craft with that policy, and regarding the special education programs, CPAC have had their eyes on it as well. So I
And
think
the students in Westford Academy were all consulted about the student voice policies. So
we've had lots of input.
these are ready for the committee's vote.
Any further comments or discussion from the committee?
Yes.
I have a feeling, oh,
Is it one vote for 5?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. God. All right, so all these numbers in one motion.
You got it.
I have faith in you.
You can do it.
Motion to approve P2114, Clean Energy and Sustainability, P5406, Student Voice and Student Advisory Committee, P5407, Student Representatives to School Committee, P6125, Student Services Programs, and P6126, Special Instructional Programs, Programs for Students with Special Needs.
Second.
Motion and a second. No last discussion, I'm assuming, correct? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. We're voting to approve those 5 policies. Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Chris is an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
That passes 7-0. Thank you. Wow, that was great.
I feel there's a little, Alicia Mallon is sitting home tonight feeling all proud,
The
all the
last-
fuzzies.
the last remnant.
There's like
there of Alicia
there's an
policies.
extra I in the universe. Yes.
Thank you for those. Seriously, policy subcommittee. What effort on those last 2 groups, and then we have one more group. Tell us about these.
Motion to waive the reading of P6127, P3203, and P3502.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we are voting to waive the readings of those 3 policies. Marisol?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Okay, we're not reading those, but will you tell us a little bit about what we're going to vote on next?
Okay.
So this would be our 3rd wave of policies
final.
this spring. 3rd and final wave of policies this spring. So tonight would be our first read. Public comment will open tomorrow. Public comment, if the committee chooses, public comment will run from May 24th through June 9th. At our next meeting on June 6th, that would be our discussion meeting. And then we would be taking the second read and final vote on these policies at our last meeting of the year, June 13th. We did kind of line that up. That still works under our policies, even though those last 2 meetings are closer together. Policy has figured out as long as we meet on June 10th, we can review any potential public comment and then report to the committee on June 13th. So it all still does work to get these in under the wire. Catherine, do you want to talk briefly about the student photograph one?
P6127, student photographs. It's a new policy. This is based off an MASC policy sample that we didn't have. So we currently have policies that cover us for, photographs that are happening in school or school events. This policy specifically talks to the school photos that happen, in school at the start of every year, where we have outside photography companies come in to take photos, class photos and individual photos. And really, it dovetails with some of our other existing policies regarding funds anyway, so we were covered in a lot of that with the student activity funds and the kind of where that funding had to be appropriated. But this really just kind of outlines that the process to which this has to happen, that these, these photographs aren't used for any other things, and families aren't pressured into having to buy the photos. So it's a very and we felt to do it now before the next year of photographs starts in the new school year. So just to add another little policy to keep us all on track. So.
The other two are both policies that were referred to us by the Finance Subcommittee as policies that might be in need of some update. The first one, public hearing on a budget. We discussed during budget season that it has always felt somewhat illogical, backwards, for us to hold the public hearing on the budget after school committee has taken a vote to approve the proposed budget that is being presented to voters at town meeting. So what this revision does is it flips that, and now it places the public hearing before that vote. We didn't want to create anything that was overly limiting for future committees or future school administrators in terms of saying precisely when it would take place. So instead, we kind of just put broad outer bounds with that it would take place at a time mutually agreed upon by the superintendent and the chair of the school committee, and the hearing would take place after the superintendent presents a proposed budget to the committee, but before the final school committee vote, which would approve the proposed budget that gets presented to voters at town meeting. All of the other, this is a statutorily required hearing, so all of the other requirements of publicizing it, announcing it, publication in a newspaper, all those things would still apply. So that is the idea behind that one. On the procurement policy, it came to the attention of Finance Subcommittee that our policy was outdated and did not currently line up with Massachusetts general law. So what this revision does is it realigns our policy with Mass general law, which has been our intent all along. It also adds a little preamble at the beginning, which clarifies that this policy is very much intended to line up with Mass general law. So if Mass general law changes, Westford Public Schools will follow whatever procurement requirements Mass general law sets forth, and then we will update this policy accordingly. We did, however, opt as policy subcommittee to keep in a lot of the details because we thought it was very helpful for public notice, for the public, for public transparency and notice to understand what this process looks like. So we did want to include some of those requirements. We tried to strike a balance between providing enough information so the public would understand what the requirements in the MGL are and not, having the entire Uniform Procurement Act reproduced here. So so we tried to strike that balance. We did also kind of add and clarify some things in when a formal bid process is required for an expenditure above $50,000. We added a little bit. There was some outdated language about like being published in a that we had to advertise in a newspaper published in Westford. Unfortunately, we no longer have a newspaper, but the language in the law is a newspaper of general circulation within the area of Westford. So, and we also added a reference to the Combi system. So we did try and add just a little bit more information there, again, for public notice and clarity to understand what that process would look like. We are very open to administrative feedback on this. I know we spoke with Pat about the direction that we were going with, but I know that we didn't have time to do kind of our normal, since we were trying to get this in under the wire, our normal kind of sending it to leadership and waiting for feedback. So absolutely, if administration has any feedback on the precise language that we put out, please just send that to us. We can certainly review it as we would any other public comment. So we're certainly open to that if you see something that needs tweaking in terms of the language. So please let us know.
And do we feel like there's a need for any legal review on those three?
Again, I'd put that to administration to take a look at. I don't think there is, because I think we're complying with the MGL.
We're updating it.
But absolutely at
we participated in the
discretion.
FinCom discussions about those in the first place, so.
Yeah. Actually, at the policy meeting, which I jumped on,
Right.
I had MGL up on another screen.
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
cross-reference
Well,
okay, good.
And a lot of the language we pulled straight. A lot of the language either came straight from the MASC model policy or straight from the MGL. So I think we're good, but since we didn't kind of take that extra leadership review step, just want to let you know we're totally open if you think we missed anything.
We didn't change any of the process or anything. We really just reworded it,
right.
and kind of just streamlined the order as opposed to changing anything.
Yeah, that's an important clarification for the public. We are not changing any of our procurement practices through this policy update. We are aligning our procurement policy with current MGL and with our current practices.
Thanks for getting those through process so quickly. That was a quick turnaround. And it works really nicely with our last meetings and just in the nick of time, and so that's nice. You will get a well-deserved rest this summer, policy subcommittee. Any questions from the committee for policy on those three policies?
No.
Okay. And we'll have plenty of time to talk more about them at the next two meetings. Thank you, folks.
Do we vote those to public comment?
No.
Or do we? Okay.
They're
It's
up.
late. It's late.
They're up.
We've taken
We
a
did
lot
the
of
first
votes.
reading.
We're good.
The first reading is
Okay.
really, I think.
Right. Okay,
all we
that's right.
have to vote on.
Just checking.
They're
It's
up.
late.
Okay,
All right.
restorative process. I'll start and say that we just talked about this. I know we've been talking about the second of the restorative community circles that we're still scheduling out. So look for that. I said that last time, in the next couple of weeks. But I'm talking to Candace from PTRC this week, and we'll find a time that works for folks. I think the big thing too was I was going to go ahead and start to schedule it. I realized I had said we would prioritize the folks who were signed up before and who didn't get to do it, and so I do need to reach back out to some of those folks and try to get at least a sense of when the best time is for them.
And you were closing your computer, and I
I'm
was
the
like,
host-
well,
I'm the host of the
I know. I was watching you do that, and I was like, does he know something I don't know? But then, and
You're good.
I don't mean to put you on the spot at all, Mr. Bunyan, but you are sitting back there, and I didn't know if you've shared with me some fantastic feedback from the Wayland Westford combined practices. I don't know if you had a thought that you wanted to share or anything.
Sure. I mean, can you come up to the mic? Sorry, Jeff.
I feel like he has to come up sitting there all evening.
I know. He stuck it out.
He made it to the 10 o'clock hour.
Yeah. Prime time.
No, thank you. Yeah, just a little bit of additional feedback. We recently conducted a series of restorative circles, restorative practices with the Wayland spring athletic teams. The framework was designed by our DEI consultant, Dr. Shannon, and Dr. Caroline, is her first name, Caroline, from Wayland. They worked together. They developed a framework. We involved all of our coaches, our administration, and basically we had a very, very successful few days of interactions. Just the discussion, the enthusiasm by the students of the different towns. They were all working together. They know that there's healing that needed to take place, but it was a terrific start to just get started with them and just move forward and understand and get connected and reconnected with the Wayland community. So it was successful. We're going to continue these discussions. I heard a little bit about what Dean Toomey was talking about earlier with the MIAA and the language on the handbooks. We have a joint DCL Principals Athletic Directors Summit meeting on June 14th, which all the principals from the DCL and all the athletic directors will be in attendance. And at that time, we're going to roll out some different sportsmanship summits for our fall teams, and some common language within the DCL for taunting and chirping and just the stuff that's just happening out there that's just not acceptable, that we're addressing. And fortunately, we all feel we're all together. Everyone feels together that we're going to tackle this together and be on the same page. So positive steps going forward. And I appreciate all the work by everybody. Our administration at Westford Academy, totally supportive. They were involved with all the sessions. Principal Antonelli, Mr. Ware, Mr. Toomey, Miss Murphy, all of my coaches that stepped up. That, they're doing a lot more than just coaching our student athletes when they get involved with this. So, not sure what other feedback you want me to give, but it really went well, and it's not going to end there. We're going to continue the process.
I just want to thank you too, because you've done a great job with Principal Antonelli from the beginning. I know that you've been very concerned about having meetings with the students, just even at the beginning anyway. In your tenure here, you meet with all the student athletes at the beginning of each season. You're meeting with all the coaches, and I think you immediately started working with, it's Heath, right? Heath Rollins.
Yep.
So you and Heath is the athletic director from Wayland. I think the two of you were collaborating early on about, okay, well, what can we do for these athletes moving forward? And then the two principals got involved. The four of you met and had a number of discussions. And then it's Carolyn Hahn, right? That's right. It's late at night, and I'm like, I couldn't remember all the names either, right? Caroline is is the district DEI director for Wayland, and so then she worked with Michelle Shannon Mingo. They developed really what I think then they put into your hands and you took to the coaches. And the feedback that I've heard from parents and from students has all been very, very positive. They didn't necessarily know what they were getting into going into the conversations, but they felt that it was very worthwhile, and it really focused again on them as athletes and them being respected and respecting others, and I think that was really key.
Very well said, yes. That's
At these events, Jeff, there was like an athletic component, right? So
what we ended up doing was we just called them restorative friendlies, spring restorative friendly sessions, where we spent about 2 hours in total with the teams. The first hour focused on the frameworks that I had discussed, some joint activities in small groups, starting in a large group, breaking up into small groups, having the student athletes work together. And then when they were done with that, they stayed in those groups and developed teams. So there was Westford and Wayland student athletes on each other's teams. So they actually played a softball game against each other, where there was half the team was Westford, half was Wayland. Same thing with tennis. Instead of playing a singles tennis match, it was a doubles match, a Wayland student athlete and a Westford student athlete against the same folks. So we were able to do it in every sport. We were not able to do it in volleyball, quite honestly, because their coach had a conflict. But it's amazing when we first had Dr. Chu address all of our student athletes, the students from the athletes from volleyball and track, and I'll get to track in a moment, but the volleyball students were like, when are we going to get to do it? We know a lot of those players. We play on some side club teams with them. So there's a chance that we may get together next week once the MIA tournament seedings are put out and just do a joint practice with Wayland and go through the same process with the DEI frameworks and then have a joint practice. And track and field, we didn't compete specifically against them in the spring, so there was no specific day set up. with them. And it's difficult just because we have about 200 student athletes on our track team. They have a much smaller team. So, but it was difficult to put that together. But everyone's embracing this, and they all want to be part of it because everybody wants to learn. They all understand what's going on. They, whether it's here or in several communities, what they see and hear in the news, and they want to be part of this change and be part of the solution. So it's encouraging to hear. I mean, Dr. Chu addressed we had about 450 student athletes in our PAC, and they were all on time. They were ready to go. They were excited to be there, and it really kicked off the next several days that we had scheduled. So that worked out well.
What's something that you learned from this process?
That the student athletes, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all want to work together. And I was encouraged with how friendly the students were with each other, the athletes. It wasn't competing us against them. It was all of us on the same field together. And the bonds and relationships that were created, you could just see them. They're getting along. They weren't, I didn't know how it would be at first, but for them to engage with one another, and for me to learn that, yes, at the end of the day, we're competing schools, but we are all the same, and we all have similar values, and their initial bond with the love for the sport that they were in brought them together and made them feel very comfortable with one another.
Yeah, so you're talking about the students, but what role do you think the administration has? Like, what did you personally learn as an
What I learned was that the groups really worked well together, and I was happy to be able to facilitate the instruction, and that through my facilitating, as I handled a bunch of the small groups, I was happy to see how much they reacted to it, and it made me feel, I had a lot of hope when I left there, that these student athletes are going to work together. And even though they're competing towns, competing schools, they all felt similar, that they wanted to continue that healing and work together towards the common goal.
And I had the privilege of seeing the girls' lacrosse, and when I had walked up to the field, you would never know that there were two separate teams. The girls were split into small groups, and each group was mixed with Westford and Wayland athletes. And there was just laughter and giddiness. There was such kind of a buzz in the air. And then when I was speaking with Mr. Bunyan, he had shared with me how prior to that they were doing some of the activities, and you mentioned specifically about the identity molecule activity, and he was talking about how he felt when part of his identity in that activity had to be removed. And what I love to see is that the adults are rolling up their sleeves and getting involved and experiencing these activities as well. And to hear his reflection, for me, was very inspiring to see that he was just in there. It wasn't organizing, telling the students or the kids to do these different types of experiences, but you were right in there with them and was learning so much through that
So
process.
Marisol, specifically, just building off that, the identity molecule activity that we did, where we basically just had to take different parts of what we felt defined us, and then one had to get taken away. So the fact that I was a father, a husband of 3 boys, all of a sudden got taken away from me, and it was alarming, because I'm like, this was taken away. And the theory behind it is if there's visible identity molecules and invisible ones, people didn't know that I was necessarily a father or a husband or a father of 3 boys. And to have that removed from me, it was just like, So it made you think about what you had, what made you you, and what maybe was visible to others, physically visible, or maybe not something that was visible to other people, So there was the 2 activities that we did, and we did a question and answer where they interviewed the different student athletes, and their willingness to share with each other was just so refreshing. And people swapping phone numbers. Can we get together? Let's play tennis with you, in the summertime. Or friendships were built out of that day, and that we had really, really positive feedback. Kids just terrific.
Can I?
Gloria had her
I
hand up a while ago.
I just had a really small comment, but I think it's important. This all started because of spectator behavior. So I want to commend our student athletes for being such a part of the healing process. They were not the perpetrators of this incident. It was spectator behavior, but our student athletes stepped up to lead the way and create this healing between the two communities, and I think they should be commended for that.
They did, and they understood that, but they also know that they're spectators at other events. So the learning was there, the education was there for them as well. And they wanted to be part of it. That's what really struck me the most. They really wanted to be part of this, and they felt good about what was happening. And this was the Westford and the Wayland community, all the students, not just from my perspective and reflecting with Heath over at Wayland, he felt the same way.
I'm curious, did any, because I know it was the basketball team that this happened at in January, and obviously they're not part of spring sports, but I'm just curious, did any of those actual players from the basketball team, were they involved in any of the other sports, the spring sports? Because it would be just really interesting to kind of get their take on it or experience something. I just love the fact that they were playing friendlies, they were mixing the teams, and it would have been really interesting to maybe get the perspective from those girl basketball players that obviously this whole thing kind of was kicked off in.
Yeah, and as you stated, it was something that was in the spectators. It wasn't on the court with the
Yeah.
actual players, but there was several players that were involved with other spring sports that were involved with that situation, or students that were in the stands.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just isolated.
That's good to hear.
Other questions? Thank you so much. That's a great update.
Thank you.
So glad that
Appreciate
was
it.
able to happen. And thanks for leading the charge on that.
Nope,
And
thank
thanks
you
for
all for your
staying.
support.
Yeah, I
Thanks for
know.
staying until, according to the agenda, it is only
9:15.
If I should make a motion to conclude the meeting, is that what my next role is?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Can
Jeff.
I ask one question on the restorative though? I know
Yep.
you were looking at doing an
are you still hosting Zoom?
review,
Yes.
you're still. You guys were looking at
Yes.
doing a review or kind of
Still,
overview.
yeah.
Have we any update
I
on
don't
when
think we have a
that's
date
happening?
for that, and so we'll
Okay.
talk this week and hopefully set a date, and we'll work towards that.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of get that.
No, that's like,
that feedback.
we want to bring everything back
Yeah.
together and give the whole community
Yep.
a thorough update, which will include pieces like this, right?
Yes.
It's a chance for the whole community who may not be tuned in, no, they're
Yeah.
not, to hear everything along the way that's happened.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too should be incorporating what we envision doing with the survey results, the
Yes.
DEI survey results too, so.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay,
Okay.
go
Thank
for
you.
it, Val.
Motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss a strategy, I can't stop smiling. Discuss a strategy with respect to Unit E, Central Office, Support Staff, and Education Office Professionals Collective Bargaining. As an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining positions, the committee will not return to public session.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
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 Gloria? Ming Chen?
I was so
Okay,
giddy.
folks, we are
to
adjourned.
adjourn.
Good night.